We'll call the meeting to order at 9 a.m. This is the Historic Site Preservation Board meeting, City of Palm Springs, California, Tuesday, February 13th, 2018. May we have the roll call, please?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chair. Member Marsh, not here yet. Member Kaiser? Here. Member Dixon?
Present.
Member Lavoie?
Here.
Member Hayes?
Here.
Vice Chair Burkett?
Here.
And Chair Johns?
Here.
You have a quorum.
You're sounding...
I'm a little raspy today. I'm fine, though.
Yes. And Ken, while you're at it, may we have the posting on the agenda? Report on the posting of the agenda.
Yes, the agenda for this meeting was posted for public review at the City Hall Bulletin Board in the west side of the City Council chambers and in the Planning Department counter in accordance with state law.
All right, thank you very much. The acceptance of the agenda, there are no changes to the order of the agenda this morning?
Mr. Chair, as I did mention to you earlier, Council Member J.R. Roberts will be joining us today to talk about the Cornelia White House, and if we could ask when we reach a moment where he can step in and we'll do the Cornelia White House because he has a short time frame with us. So
okay.
As you see him and we reach a close of a certain item, we'll bring him up if that's all right.
All right, very good.
Thank
so based on that, motion to accept the agenda is posted with that.
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Who is the second?
Linda and Bill. All righty, thank you very much. The following time has been set aside for public comment. If there is anyone in the audience today that would like to address the board, now would be an excellent time to do that. You'll have 3 minutes to speak to the board. We have 2 public hearings this morning on the agenda, an application by Mark and Jane Garrison and an amendment to the Class 1 Historic Site designation of the Oasis Hotel. So if you would like to address the board on either of those 2 items, you may do that during the public hearing. But I will open the public comment period now and invite members of the audience to please come forward if there are any. All righty, seeing none. We are just opening the public comment. If anyone is in the audience wishing to speak to the board at this time. Nope. All right. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. Consent calendar. We have no minutes, and we'll see those minutes at the March meeting.
Yes, we will.
All right. Very good. All right. So we'll move on to our item number 2 on the agenda. It's a public hearing. This is public hearing 2A. This is an application by Mark and Jane Garrison, owners for Class 1 Historic Site designation of the William Holden residence located at 1323 South Driftwood Drive. This is HSPB number 110. Ken Lyon, staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As noted in your staff report, this is an incredible post and beam style home that was built in 1955 for the family of George F. Barrett. The person with significance that is associated with the home, however, is actor William Holden, and thus the home is referred to in our staff report and for the purposes of this designation as the William Holden residence. The applicant has brought forward this application, and the Historic Resources Report, which was provided to you earlier, was prepared for the homeowners by the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation. The home, as you had seen on the tour of it earlier this month, is quite extraordinary when you look at many of the other mid-century homes that we have in Palm Springs. This is obviously not a typical tract house. This was a custom-built home and was a very large home with a number of wings and a lot of distinctive separation of the various spaces within the home. The home has gone through several different owners, and one of the most recent owners went through a very comprehensive renovation of the home, changing many of the characteristics of the home that are outlined in your staff report. As noted in the staff report and in the Historic Resources Report, this home is significant in that it reflects a particular period in Palm Springs history, that being the mid-century period, when many of our most notable structures really were brought into focus. And this home stands as an exemplary example of that. As noted on page 4 of your staff report, the home is also associated with persons of significance, that being actor William Holden. Holden owned the home for about 10 years, and his significance, of course, is well noted for his acting career. There were also additional interests that he had later in his life, including conservation of wildlife in Africa and the creation of the Mount Kenya Game Ranch, which was also inspired in the creation of the William Holden Wildlife Foundation. The home was built by a local contractor named Joseph Pauling. And Joseph Pauling is noteworthy because he's built many other significant homes in Palm Springs, including the William Burgess residence on Palisades Drive, and a couple of notable custom homes designed by Wexler and Harrison on Liliana Drive in the Mesa Tract. He was also noted in the Historic Resources Report for having created what he had dubbed the House of Tomorrow. That's not to be mistaken, of course, with the Alexander's House of Tomorrow that is still standing. Sadly, as noted in the Historic Resources Report, the home that Joseph Pauling built had been demolished. When you look at the house in its current condition, and I would reference you to page 4 and excuse me 7, thank you, of the staff report. The home has undergone a significant number of changes. There have been removal of sliding glass doors, replacement with the pivoting glass doors that you saw on the tour. Wood front doors had been replaced with a pivoting door. Removal of certain portions of solid walls that have been replaced with glass walls. Removal of exterior sconces. Removal of the front circular drive. Installation of Grass Creek pavers. Installation of various site walls, planters, fireplaces, and exterior barbecue features. The new swimming pool, and then, of course, the entire structure has been painted white, which is different than what you can see in the Historic Resource Survey and in the staff report photos comparing before and after. The home does still retain a high degree of integrity, though, in terms of its expression of an unusually beautiful and rambling version of a post and beam home. Of course, its association with William Holden remains. And so the recommendation on your staff report is that this home does have the characteristics that make it eligible as being defined as a historic structure in Palm Springs. On page 10 of your staff report, we have listed, on page 9 and 10, are the defining historic characteristics, and then we've also identified those items that have been added or changed since the home was originally built, which we believe do not represent contributing features to the home. And that concludes my staff report. Again, this is a recommendation to the City Council for Class 1 historic site designation of the home. I'm available to answer any questions you may have, and the applicant is also in the audience. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions of staff before we open the public hearing? Todd?
A
little closer, I think.
well, no, it feels like it's in my forehead now. On the first page of the staff report, where item number 2, where you say designate the parcel, but then obviously in the description on the next page, you talk about there being 4 single-family lots. Does this designation cover all 4 lots, and where is that represented?
We've recognized it as a parcel, even though it's 4 separate parcels. If you want to clarify that further in your actual designating motion, you could do so. When you listen to the testimony of the applicant, part of the emphasis and the reason that they have felt that this designation was so important is because of the setting. Right. This is unusual to find a home in Palm Springs that's been built upon 4 large lots, and it is truly, as you saw when you visited, an unbelievable setting within which this home is sited. And part of their desire in making this designation is that the property or the land that surrounds this home, comprised of those 4 lots, not be chopped up and sold off as individual parcels. So that would be appropriate if you want to, in whatever motion you choose to make, if you want to clarify the point that the parcel is comprised of those 4 lots, you should certainly do so.
Okay, great, thank you.
Ken, do you have a visual of that I think that you do. That way the members of the audience know exactly what we're talking about. We've all been there, and I mean, I think that's a pretty good representation of the, thank you.
Yeah, so what you have here is literally 4 quarter-acre city lots all combined to make this parcel.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of staff before I open the public hearing? Please.
Could you show us the photographs of the existing on the overhead? Because mine are very dark.
Any in particular that you wanted to see?
Actually, all of them.
Okay. You want me to go through them you want me to narrate these as I go through them, or simply observe them as I move through them?
Just go slowly.
Okay. So here you're seeing before and after front. I'm going to try to do this a little bit more slowly if I can. Again, this is entryways. There's the original on the left and then the current on the right. There may be some actual additional photos as we get into this part of the Historic Resources report. Bear with me a minute. See if I can scroll faster here. Okay.
Yeah, here we go.
This is the bedroom wing you see here. And then here you see it in situ, that's on the left side of that image. Here, you get an image of the entire home. So the street front would be on the right in this image, and of course the bedroom suite master is on the north, and the casita is in the blue on the south. This is an image of the rear of the home during the period of time that the Barretts owned it. This is an image of the front of the home shortly after its construction. And this again are images of the current condition here. Some of the details and the glazing. This is the back patio area between the home and the casita. That's the westerly view. Again, this captures, I think, in a dramatic way, what you're seeing in terms of the setting of this home. It's truly extraordinary. These are images from an earlier article on the home that was published, I believe, in the Villager. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I believe that's it. Yep. You're welcome.
Is that fine, Bill? Okay. Any other questions of staff at this time? All right. We'll open the public hearing. Anyone here wishing to speak on this item? Please come forward, please. Welcome. Good morning. If you'll introduce yourself for us.
Good morning. Jane Garrison. My husband and I are the owners of this incredible home and land. Just want to clarify a few things. The pool is original, which I'm incredibly grateful that the previous owner who did do the remodeling did keep the original pool because it's nice and deep. I think it was really noted very well by staff that our desire is to, and for Todd bringing this up, our desire is to protect not just the architecture, but the entire setting, because it's incredible, and we've seen other lots in the city that have been broken up, and it really changes. And the builder did such a great job siting this house, and so we want to make sure this entire setting is definitely preserved. And 2 other things. One is there's a lot of confusion in town when we say we own the William Holden residence or house, because there's 2. So I don't know if it's possible, but realtors and the public for many years have referred to this house as the William Holden estate and the one on Southridge as the William Holden house or residence. So it would be nice, just for clarification, for the public, if we could call this one the William Holden Estate, just to make it a little easier. And the last thing is I was sitting and I was thinking about this last night about, as preservationists, about mid-century architecture and other architecture and homes. And we always look at what a house was and what it is today. And I do that myself. I look at so many. I go back and I look at the pictures of what a house was, and I look at what it was today. And then I started thinking that we really need to also start looking at what it's going to be tomorrow. And that is our biggest desire, is to get this historic status, is because what we don't want to see, and we would never do this, but we don't want to see someone in the future knock down this incredible architecture and build 4-track homes. So it is important to look at what it was, what it is, but I think it's also important of what it's going to be in the future. So we are very much in support of this and incredibly grateful for the job that the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation did in researching the home. And they certainly know a lot more about the home than we do, since we're new owners. So I know that they're here, and they'd probably answer any questions anyone has. But thank you all so much for this consideration.
Thank you, Jane. Ken, before I call up the next speaker, Jane just said that the swimming pool is original, but we have it listed under non-contributing features.
That was my understanding, so if that's a clarification, we can make that correction.
Okay. I don't think if there's any opposition. Anyone else wishing to speak this morning? Okay, perfect. We might find out more about the swimming pool now. Good morning. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning. I'm Ron Marshall from the Palm Springs Preservation Foundation. I'm usually not here when you're reviewing one of the nominations Barbara and I wrote, so this is a real treat. So if you have any charges or alibis for previous nominations, this is your opportunity. As I recall, the pool is identified as one of the objects in the nomination as a contributing item, so I think the nomination holds up. So, and just before we move off of the designation of the site, I know that, Todd, it's a good point, Todd, we should, of course, have the HSPB recommendation to that effect, but of course it falls on staff to make sure that the resolution that the City Council signs off on, in fact, says exactly that. I'd like to talk about criteria 5 a bit, and that's master builder. And staff decided not to add that criteria. And I know it's kind of splitting hairs, because thank you for agreeing with criteria 2, 3, and 4, and I'm pushing for 5, even though we only need 1. So Joe Pauling's career shows a very impressive arc. He started with his Wexler designs on Liliana in 1954. A year later, he does the Holden residence, and then his own immensely popular original design with the 1957 House of Tamara. You know, the staff report kind of implied to me that because Pauling appropriated some of Wexler and Harrison's motifs, that it somehow diminishes his credibility as a designer. And that sounds like a reasonable argument. But even our locally famous, our most famous master builder in town, Alva Hicks, you know, he was copying out of common house plan books, and they were in wide circulation at the time. And much of the credit that Hicks is given as a craftsman belongs more appropriately to his head carpenter, Lee Miller. He was the one doing the gorgeous painted trusses that we've all kind of come to love. And many of Alva Hicks's most impressive commissions were, of course, designed by William Charles Tanner. You know, a few years ago, Barbara and I went to one of these open houses with a new Crystal butterfly, and it had been endorsed by Bill. And the realtor was very effusive. He got up and he talked about how wonderful the house was, and he said, and here's the man who invented the butterfly roof, Bill Kreisel. So I had an opportunity to sit down with Bill, and I said, oh, I didn't know that you invented the butterfly roof. And Bill, always the clever gentleman, said, what was I going to do, call him a liar? So Bill knows full well that he had appropriated the design, you know, whether he got it from Goodman on the East Coast. And I only mentioned Goodman on the East Coast because Goodman always said that he stole the butterfly from Marcel Brewer. And of course, Brewer talked about stealing it from Oscar Niemeyer. So I don't know how far back we go. That was Oscar Niemeyer was in the 30s. So it begs the question, you know, who are the master builders of the mid-century? And I think we can make a good argument that Pauling fits the moniker of a master builder better than, say, Robert Higgins, who almost always worked with architects. Most folks have never heard of Boris Gerson. He did great designs down there at Canyon Country Club, but he did those with Wexler and Harrison. Or Palm Desert builders, Patton and Wild, who did some great houses up on Southridge. So I think that Pauling is the perfect candidate to be identified as our first mid-century master builder. The term master builder is in the municipal code, but we never really have decided who meets that criteria. I'd also like to address the opinion that the house doesn't meet the aesthetic ideal, I think it's just 5B, of, say, a Kaufman house or an Abernathy house. You know, I have to say that if we're going to set the bar as high as the Kaufman house with regard to being an aesthetic ideal, that's a pretty high bar. You know, we have an embarrassment of riches here. If this was the Historic Site Preservation Board of West Covina, for example, and the staff said, well, it's not as good as the Kaufman house, they would think the staff was crazy. And I think we can all agree that if we yanked up the William Holden residence and plopped it anywhere in the country, it would be the best modernist structure in that little city. So how do you sort through all this? I think it's simple. I think when you stand in the backyard and you look at the house, it's one of the most gorgeous examples of post and beam architecture. Post and beam architecture, as Bill would tell you, is very simple in concept. The execution is a whole different thing. And I think when you stand in the back, you see how sublime it is. You know, I know post and beam architecture, blah, 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 for years. But when I stand in that backyard and I walk around that backyard, it really is sublime. So it's really about the execution, and I don't know that I can think of it being executed anywhere better in the city than at the Holden House. So that's why I think criteria 5 holds up in this. And, you know, I think the staff, to their credit, tries to have a high standard with regard to these criteria, and I appreciate that. But I think if we're going to identify our first mid-century master builder, I think Pauling deserves that. It's always a surprise, you know, I read the staff report and I go, oh, would they get hung up on this time? It was 5 this time you got hung up on. So had I known that was going to be the case, you know, we could have had a laundry list of other residences in Palm Springs that Pauling did. In fact, if you look at a lot of the places in Deepwell, you know, you don't think of Deepwell as anybody's particular tract, but you look, if you start yanking building permits, you're going to see Pauling through Deepwell. I think Deepwell is pretty much appreciated as a pretty great architecturally significant neighborhood. So that's all I've got. And any questions for me? Yes, sir.
Mr. Marshall, thank you.
Hi,
Okay.
do you actually have a job list for Pauling?
No, we never created one because mostly it would have required yanking a lot of building permits. We thought the fact that he had gotten such good press, especially with the House of Tomorrow, the 57 House of Tomorrow, as you probably read in the report, they flew down the LA press. I think they had 10,000 people go through the house at $1 a piece for a fundraiser. So pretty much the whole city saw the house. Was pretty impressed. If you were in Palm Springs during the summer of '57, you saw that house and you talked about it at your cocktail parties.
Somebody else here?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Marshall, integrity is the issue I'm
Yes.
having.
Yes.
And I read recently, and I guess it was about sites, that if Mr. Holden drove up to this house, would he recognize it? And so my question to you is, had we designated this house in, say, 2000, would we have allowed this remodel in 2012?
I think not. But, you know, I think if you had blindfolded Bill Holden, you'd find that Bill Holden would know the floor plan, that the floor plan has in fact stayed pretty much intact, and it's really about the materiality, replacing one type of glass door with another type of glass door. I at first was really unnerved, Bill, and I'm glad you bring this up. I was unnerved that the slump stone, and I love my slump stone, had been parged over and made nice and smooth. I said, oh my God, that's terrible. But then I reflected on the fact that so much of the materiality for some of our significant structures here has been changed. I mean, how much wood have we seen converted to stucco? And I offer you, for example, the Frank Sinatra house, stuccoed over because that East Fort Williams great board and batten got absolutely scorched and chopped up, in the sun here. Should they have replaced it with board and batten every 15 years, 20 years? Yeah, maybe that would have been my preference. But the fact of the matter is we've designated a lot of houses that the materiality has been changed. And one might argue it's really just switching smooth concrete for bumpy concrete. It's not that slump stone is a particularly precious material. But I see to your point, would he recognize it from the front? No. If you blindfolded him, would he know the floor plan intimately? Yeah, absolutely. And so many times, we're spending a lot of time on the integrity section because the floor plans have been changed, and we're really making these torturous rationalizations about, they converted this to a garage, or they did this and that, and sometimes that starts to get a little old. So I appreciate what you're saying.
We're not designating the interior that I know of.
That's true. That is absolutely true. But certainly the what's the term? The overall form, the overall. I don't know how to. You can phrase it better than I can. I know you can.
Any other? Oh, Todd, please. Sorry, Bill.
So can you speak to the issue of naming the house? I would agree that, for celebrities in Palm Springs who have owned multiple houses, and someone says, oh, that's the Frank Sinatra house, and I'm like, well, which one are you talking about? Or that's the Dinah Shore house, well, which one are you talking about? And I would agree that William Holden had two significant houses, and so not that it's going to necessarily be the be-all, end-all solution to this, but I would love to be able to officially, in our the designation, if it happens, correct at least part of that confusion. And so could you address whether or not the appropriate name for this would be residence or estate? And if it is estate, is there some appropriate support to calling it the William Holden Estate versus residence?
Yeah, my argument, of course, would be that the proper name is the Bennett residence. So, I mean, there is one historic name for a house, the name of the first owners. And fortunately, the city form asks for the historic name, and we provide the historic name as the Bennett residence. Then it asks for other names, and I think that's really the crux of the discussion here. There is a William Holden residence as a historic name, William Holden residence, historic name, up on Southridge. And of course, I think that William Holden Estate is perfectly fine. I mean, we're really talking about common names here. I don't think we're injecting any confusion into this. If we want to call it William Holden residence, William Holden number 1, William Holden number 2. I think Ken talked about 1 and 2 if he wanted to, but there is only one historic name to the residence. But I don't think that the owners, the Garrisons, really care, except that they would prefer William Holden Estate only because the realtors have made that the common name. They refer to it as the William Holden Estate pretty consistently over the last 5 years. So I don't have a problem with that if the staff wants to use that as a common name. The historic name will never change.
So I guess then that begs the question, is the more appropriate name to use is Barrett than not use Holden at all?
I think that the staff is probably better qualified to talk about that, because I don't think that the staff has slavishly adhered to the historic name convention in the past. You've referred to the common name on many occasions, as I recall. I think you had a listing of common names that you now refer to these residences as.
Generally speaking, if there's been an individual or a person of significance who's associated with the house, we've typically had the home named after that person of significance. So when you look at the Charlie Farrell residence, it was named after Charlie Farrell, even though he was not the first owner. Same story here. There are a couple of others like that. So simply out of a matter of consistency, we identified this house as the William Holden estate, or the William Holden residence.
And Todd, you're a Realtor. You know the difference between Bennett residence and Holden residence is about $1 million.
Any other questions for Mr. Marshall?
I do.
Yeah, please.
Back to Bill's point about integrity. Integrity seems to me can sometimes be subjective.
Sure.
As to really what the interpretation of integrity is all about. And you gave some very good examples. So, I guess if I'm just trying to understand, from your standpoint, then the integrity of the house is there because there are so many positive, you're weighing more positive against negative. Is that
Absolutely.
basically what you're saying? So this would be a case-by-case situation with each house, whatever coming before us.
Absolutely. It might be instructive to some of the folks on this board that there was a time when there was no integrity section in these nominations. The city didn't
Right.
really have that. That's a Department of the Interior set of criteria, and we owe it to Patrick McGrew, who started sticking in these rather voluminous and long-winded sections on integrity. But I think that they've been very good for both the city and for the people who write nominations to go ahead and make sure that this integrity criteria is rigorously applied to these
Right.
new residences. And sometimes I go overboard because I don't want someone to impeach one of these nominations and say, well, you never mentioned this change, you never mentioned that change. So sometimes, even it may sound like I'm being real picky about the changes that are made, but it's really intended so that somebody can't impeach the nomination downstream, that the board recognized that these changes had been made, but nonetheless thought it was such a great example of mid-century architecture, blah, 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 that it was worth designation. And I certainly think that that's the case here with the Holden residence.
Well, interesting. What I think I just understood and learned recently is that actually integrity is not even required by our ordinance. Is that true?
That's correct.
Right. But as you said, McGrew really brought it to the table, and it's sort of been it's been there, not official, but it's being used now, where it hadn't been before. But just for the record, it is not actually even it doesn't have to meet it. So
Municipal code, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thanks, Dick, for
Great.
bringing that up.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think, Bill, would it have been nice to have this designated prior to 2012? Absolutely. That doesn't mean we shouldn't designate it now, because who knows what somebody's going to try to do in 2020 when another owner has it. Hopefully you guys will be there a long time. I don't mean 2020, you'll have sold it by But downstream, that's the point of these designations, because, intuitively, or, people, well, it's the local designation that has the teeth. It's this board that's going to always see the changes to that house. And, I'm sure that this board will continue to do its good work well into the future.
Mr. Marshall? Vincent?
This is more of a question for staff. On page 31, basically it shows the configuration of the 4 lots. Are the 2 lots in the rear, well, first of all, is the house built on 2 of the lots? And then the 2 rear lots, are those legally accessible lots? Is there a side street that potentially could lead to the rear lots? Are they legal lots of record?
Back there.
Right. The 2 lots that the home is sited on are on the lots that front Driftwood. And the 2 lots that are at the western half of this parcel front the street behind it, which is Manzanilla.
So in our designation, we really want to call out all 4 lots for protection and perpetuity, essentially. Because in the deed, it shows 7, 8, 15, and 16 as one parcel.
Right, that's for you to make a determination on, whether you believe that those 4 lots comprise the significance of the site.
I guess what I'm trying to say is so that I know, in support of the owner, that in the future, if the property does get sold, that it remains 4 parcels, 4 lots, under the designation.
And just to respond to that, what we would do in the ordinance, if that's the direction that you go, I'm sorry, the resolution, is that we would reference all parcel ID numbers as part of the resolution.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Marshall? All right, thank you very much. Anyone else here this morning wishing to speak during this public hearing? All right, please come forward. Good morning. Chris, we all know you, but please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Menrad. I'm a resident of Palm Springs for 19 years and also president of the Palm Springs Modern Committee. And I'm really here to talk to you about one word, and it is not plastics, but it is integrity. And we believe that integrity is really everything. Everything should flow from that. If you don't have, in the report that has been prepared by staff, as is literally riddled with this word, and we feel that if you're going to designate something, it has to, if the person were to come back from the dead and they can't recognize it, then what are you actually designating? It's really important. I think it's confusing if something is designated that then people are going to look at it and go like, is that what it looked like? It's not what it looked like. I saw that house before it was renovated. It was for sale. I wish I had pictures of it. There are real estate pictures that appear in the report. But if you look at, if you go into Google Earth and go back in time, 2007, the street view, you can actually kind of walk along. Those are captured in the report from staff, but it's really much more apparent if you kind of do it yourself because it's not blurry and you really kind of see. But this house has been significantly changed from what it was. And, you know, if you want to designate it because William Holden had it for 11 years or the site, that's great, but I really think we need to change something in our codes such that Patrick McGrew introduced and Dick Burkett has sort of brought up to where integrity is absolutely essential. And everything has to flow from that. And if you don't have integrity, then what are you actually designating? You're kind of diluting all of the designations that have gone before and may go after. And so it's a little bit of a slippery slope. So anyway, that is I want the board to really, really, really look at those early pictures such as they are in this report and what it is there now. Yes, the form is there, and I kind of speak to it a little bit myself because my house has been designated. And actually, the original owner of my house is Charlie Farrell. And I wrote my report to designate my house. And I didn't really mention Farrell because to me it was about the architecture and the integrity of the house. Now, my question to you is, let's say my house was not designated. I think you all know my house. If I were to take it and remove the tectum panels and the wood elements and the brick and smooth coat it in white stucco, and there would be the form, Butterfly House, would you designate my house? And I put Charlie Farrell's name on it. That is something you have to think about. How are you designating it? Is it Charlie Farrell's house or is it an important mid-century type? We would like to see that distinction made so that the confusion of historic designations, why is it historically designated, is not there. That's a really important photograph, that right there, that postcard of the William Holden house. You can see detail of what it was. It was very sort of a Japanese kind of looking thing. It's a beautiful house, and it is a beautiful house now, but it's not what it was. And we really want you to think about it. And if you're going to designate it, be very clear what you're designating. But integrity going forward is everything. And if that's not there, we don't think it should be something that is designated. And that's it.
Any questions for Chris? All right, Chris, thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else in the audience wishing to address us during the public hearing? All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Thank you. Board? Linda, you've been quiet this morning.
Yes, I have. I've been taking all of this in.
Okay. I'm not calling on you, it's just...
I have some thoughts.
Okay.
I I saw the house. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot.
There you go.
Pull it forward to you.
The architecture of the house, the post and beams, is phenomenal. The site is phenomenal. I think the way the former homeowner redid the house, that he kept, I think, the integrity of the floor plan. I'm not sure if many people would come back to Palm Springs and recognize their homes, and we've made them historic Class 1 designations. So I feel the property definitely needs to be recognized. It needs to be preserved. The site needs to include all 4 parcels, and changing the name to the estate, I have no problem with that. So those are my thoughts. I mean, I think the word integrity sometimes it's really hard to define when you have a property that is significant. I think that Joseph Pauling needs to be recognized in this town. I think he's done a lot of great work, and he's been overlooked, similar to when we had the site at the corner of Palm Canyon. I can't remember the architect. Palm Canyon, where the Wendy's wanted to go in. I mean, Lappner. I mean, that was, no one was talking about him until that site came to our board. And then all of a sudden, he's been recognized, and people are talking more and more, and he did this, and he did that, we need to save this. And I think that this is very similar to that. That's it for me.
I have a few comments, Todd. You know, when we, someone mentioned if William Holden were to pull up in front of the house today, would he recognize it? I'll fantasize for a minute and put Frank Sinatra in a car and have him arrive at the Twin Palms house. Would he find the front door? No, I don't think he would, because the front door has been significantly altered. The front of the house is now on Gran Via Belmonte and not on Alejo. The board and batten has been removed and the stucco is there. So it is an issue that I think this board has to acknowledge and wrestle with, but I don't think anyone would deny that the E. Stewart Williams Twin Palms house, with its changes, might have compromised the integrity of the property. So I think that the integrity issue needs to be further explored, but in this particular situation, we've heard from Linda, I would certainly feel like the integrity has been maintained with some changes. If we go forward this morning, I would like to mention that the quandary that we face about whether this is the William Holden estate or the William Holden residence, what I would put to the board is, could we acknowledge these 2 houses or recognize these 2 houses by their distinctive neighborhoods? We have the William Holden Deepwell house and we have the William Holden Southridge house. Does that define, I see Bill nodding his head, and that always helps. So maybe that's how we, I'm just bringing it forward because these are 2 distinctly well-known neighborhoods, the Southridge neighborhood and the Deepwell neighborhood. So perhaps as we go forward this morning, we might include that in any motion that might be coming. Further discussion? Todd?
So I'm also torn, and I really appreciate what Chris said, and I really appreciate what Bill said, because, and I couldn't agree more with what Chris said in that, and everybody, and what Dick said and Gary about integrity. However, my quandary is, you know, does that prevent us from designating a house? And I think what's before us today is we have an opportunity to save this site. We have an opportunity to stop anything else from happening. And a lot of what has happened could essentially be undone, and this house could relatively easily be brought back to what it was. Almost in looking at it the hardest thing would be to, restore the wall in the front. You'd almost have to tear the wall down and build a new wall. But a lot of the glass could be put back, the doors could be put back. And so if this site is saved in its current condition with these 4 contiguous parcels, nothing more can be done with it. If we don't save this site, it's possible that somebody could decide to sell off those back 2 parcels, and now this wonderful house is going to sit on half of its land and make it half as important. So I certainly understand, and I'm not disagreeing with what Chris said. I totally agree with that. However, and everything else, and if there is a house where the board and batten has been stuccoed over, the fact that that's a saved house still has an opportunity to bring back that board and batten because it's saved. And so, I mean, I am in favor of the designation mostly because I want to see this house saved, and it's not just because of the structure, it's because of the 4 contiguous parcels. I think that's equally as important. And that's what the opportunity is before us today, is to save this house where it is in time for future people, and that if somebody in the future, if 20 years from now somebody else buys this house and they want to restore it, they have the opportunity to restore it because it's been saved and not changed anymore. And so that's, I guess, all I have to say.
Mr. Chair, if I could just interject
Please.
briefly, following Todd's comments. There's language in our ordinance relative to that point. We've already discussed the fact that integrity is not one of the criterion that we use in our ordinance currently, and that's certainly something that we can discuss at a later point in time. But under the language for Class 1 designation, it indicates that Class 1 is intended for use when the structure or site still exists as it did during the historical period or is restorable. And Mr. Hayes' comments were that the residence is restorable. And so I feel that even though there is the question of integrity relative to this residence with some of the modifications that have been made, as Mr. Hayes has pointed out, it is restorable.
Thanks, Glenn.
Mr. Chair.
Please.
So I'm hung up on integrity. Can I have the photograph back of the postcard? One of the characteristics of modernism in Palm Springs, as I've come to learn, is a blending of aesthetics, and one of them is the post and beam here expressed in a very Miesian way. I would even blame Cody for the inspiration. Thank you. I would also note that Cody quite often used slumpstone and played off that very Miesian post and beam against walls that were very textural and quite often slumpstone in one form or another. Also, the way the landscaping is in the front yard, the site walls in the front are a very 60s modern move. And yeah, everybody was reading, I mean, I actually was going to school back then. Everybody was reading Sunset Magazine and being inspired and copying and copying. Well, welcome to architecture. We've been copying ever since the pyramids. That's part of what we do. There have been a few new ideas. But when I see this is a house worth preserving as a piece of architecture. Now, we have criteria that doesn't require us to preserve the architecture. We can do the site because someone lived there or something happened there. The pattern of development is what it was when Mr. Holden owned it. So how do I get what I want and get this designation? Because I do agree that this is a designatable structure, but I don't want someone to drive up 20 years from now and look at the building as it exists today and go, oh, that's what they did in 1960. They did these pivoting doors. They did smooth plaster walls. That's a lie. That when you will go up to the house, it's a beautiful example of 1912 or 2012 remodeling. We didn't have pivoting doors in 1980. If we did, we only had 2 of them. And so it's creating a false sense of history. which we're prevented from doing. So in the designating documents, under integrity and character-defining features, I would like very clearly identified those elements on page 9 of the staff report, item 4, those items that were removed, and that should the house be restored to its period of significance, that those items should be replaced in a work program. Then I could support the designation.
Okay, Bill, if we come to a motion, I'm going to let you weigh in on that. Any further discussion? Please, Kent?
Mr. Chair, I want to just address 2 items that were mentioned earlier and clarify a bit. If you go into the Historic Resources report on page 20, there is a building permit that was issued in 2011 to remodel the existing pool, add the spa, add the tanning ledge, add the steps, split the drains, new equipment, and gas line. So the argument that I would have in this case is that, yes, there was a swimming pool there at the time of William Holden's occupancy of this house, but it is not the pool that is there now.
Okay.
And part of why it's important that we identify the character-defining features is that for future boards, it's important to understand what is part of the original fabric of these buildings and what has been added or modified. And in the staff report in which I said the swimming pool is not a character-defining feature, I was having to dredge my memory up here as to why I came to that conclusion. It was because the pool has been substantially remodeled to the point that it doesn't reflect the pool that was there during the 50s and 60s. And part of this goes forward to the notion of, if a future homeowner chooses to make modifications to this home, these questions come back to the board. And so the board is going to look, and let's say the owner decides he wants to put a pool that is oriented east-west instead of north-south. If you characterize this pool, which is not the original pool, as a historic defining characteristic, then there's some trouble in terms of a future homeowner deciding he may want to modify that pool. So that's the argument that we would make at a staff level for saying, yes, there was a swimming pool there during the Holden period. This is not the one that was there. And if a future homeowner wanted to further modify this pool, he should be permitted to do so. The second thing that I want to speak to is on the issue of the analysis of a home against the definition of a historic site. That's really what we're doing here when you make findings is this home historic? Does it meet the definition of a historic site according to the city's ordinance? And I want to speak very briefly just to the comment as to why we took a different tack with respect to the contractor, Joseph Pauling. The point that this says is not only that the individual happens to be a master builder, designer, or artist. The rest of the sentence needs to be read. That possesses a high artistic value and has influenced his age. That has influenced his age. I believe in writing the staff report and analyzing this project that Joseph Pauling has done some remarkable homes in the city. But I'm not sure that the argument has been made to say that he has actually been such an influence that he has influenced others. He has certainly built homes by many notable architects, Wexler and Harrison and others, but the reason that we recommended that it not meet the criteria in terms of the distinctive characteristics of a master builder designer is because we couldn't find the information in the report that demonstrates that Pauling actually influenced others. Pauling was influenced by others, but we couldn't find evidence in the report that Pauling had influenced others. And that's the minor distinction I just wanted to make on that. If you choose to still carry it forward that way, that's your prerogative. But I want to just clarify why we had pulled that one back.
Ken, both points well clarified, especially on the pool. Thank you for that. And I will take certainly...
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes, your consideration on why you left Pauling out on the master builder. Linda?
So when a building permit states remodel existing pool, that doesn't mean that it keeps its shape. That means remodel the pool, you can take the whole pool out and do anything you want. You can put a triangle in.
You could, yes.
So that's what remodel means. Remodel means it doesn't mean remodel the existing structure. It means you can demolish and recreate.
Expansion.
The difference of the distinction of words might be restore. If one were to pull a building permit to restore a swimming pool, one would assume that you're keeping the coping and you're keeping the tile and you're repairing the plaster and you're keeping the overall physical appearance of that pool. That would be a restoration. But to remodel something generally means that there's a change that's taken place. Now, there are subtleties in this, and if you were to go to the building department, if they got a building permit application that said restore or remodel or rehabilitate, they might not make a difference one way or the other. But when you're talking about something that has a historic resource characteristic to it, then I think the wording becomes more important.
Well, I guess my argument there is, apparently the house that we know in Indian Canyons, was that remodeled, where they tore the whole house down and they kept the fireplace and, you know, everything went, and that house should have come before this board, before it was demolished, literally?
Yes.
So that's the problem. The problem is at the permit end of things. We're not saying restore, we're saying remodel, and we're letting them tear things down or completely redo things.
Yes, exactly. It's the language we use as architects. A remodel is everything, and this used to be played on the coast more than it does here, to get around a coastal permit. A remodel, you had to leave 3 studs and tear everything else out. And you left either the fireplace or 3 studs, and it was a remodel. And that suited the Coastal Commission and most building departments in California. And it's since then, we have substantial demolition.
Yeah.
Is a new concept. So, I mean, and it's not enforced with any kind of like guidelines in California. Every city has a different opinion of what that means. So, yeah, it's.
So that's why we're seeing things disappear, because
That's why
they're
we're
saying
seeing Ken's
remodel
disappear,
and
but
they're
yeah, I
tearing
mean,
it down.
and Ken's absolutely correct. And we in 2012, when this was done or whenever, we wouldn't have used the word restore, because that's we wouldn't have used it. Period. It's a new word, and it's a preservation word.
Well, I'd say we get that word into some of our.
Board, our discussion 5C this morning is going to open this whole dialogue for all of us to have input on it, but let's stay on the agenda item at hand. Dick, did you have something?
Yes, I do. So I just want to clarify, what we really are working today on and making the decision are the 4 points that staff has identified. And we're really not dealing, I mean, integrity has come up many times, and it's not even a part of the ordinance. So what we really are voting on really doesn't even involve integrity in this particular situation. But that, again, could be one of the things that I think should be put on to the list that we've started for ordinance changes, is integrity, because what Chris brought up is a very good point. But for this property, I think our focus, if I'm understanding correctly, let's just deal with we're talking about the 4 different elements that staff has brought up. Correct, Ken?
Mr. Chair. Well, our ordinance doesn't specifically use the words integrity. In the opening definition, which is what you're considering when you look at this any of these projects, you're looking at a building that is quote-unquote unique or significant because of its location, design, setting, materials, workmanship, and aesthetic effect. Those are the qualities of integrity. So while it isn't literally spelled out in your ordinance, you are evaluating these properties against the qualities of integrity by the very definition of what we have in our coordinates for a historic site.
Okay.
So you look at the
appreciate that.
definition as it's stated there and the additional criteria. Okay?
Very helpful.
All right,
Thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else? Discussion? Motion,
Mr. Chair,
please?
I move to accept the staff report, which I find excellent, with the following modification, that to page 10, the items listed on page 9, item 4, materials, those materials that were lost be included as lost contributing elements.
As lost contributing elements, is that what you said?
Yes,
Okay.
And period.
Is that your motion, Bill?
Yes, it is.
Okay, do we have a second?
There was a request for the change name for the Holden Deepwell residence.
Well, and I was going to, in our discussion point, I'm going to add a few things as
Okay,
well.
yeah.
So we have a motion?
I'll second if the maker of the motion will consider that all 4 parcels are one lot.
Yes.
Okay, good, yes, I wanted that included as well. The 4 lots designated. The only thing else that I would add is I would just, while we're in discussion, we have a first and a second, a little more discussion about whether we do now recognize Pauling and add the criteria number 5. Linda's point, really well made when we talked about Howard Lapham a couple of months ago. Some people knew Howard Lapham, some didn't. Today, he is much more well-known because of the educational output that we've done here. So I'd ask the board to consider Pauling as a master builder.
Mr. Chair, I had that down as one of my points, and I overlooked it, and I would like to include number 5.
The maker of the motion?
No objection.
No objection? Okay. So, Ken?
Mm-hmm.
So we have the motion on the floor. The maker of the second has added the 4 lots and criteria number 5 to.
Correct.
Got that?
Got it all.
Okay, anybody else? I'm going to call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, thank you. Congratulations. Thank you all.
Mr. Chair.
Please.
Councilmember Roberts is here, and we have him for a very short period of time.
Okay.
So could we please move on to the, step out of the agenda order for a moment and do the Cornelia
Yes.
White residence, please?
That'll be fine, yes. No objections. We're planned for that.
You want to read it into the record, and you want to read the item into the record? And we'll-
Yes, I'm just getting to it. Thank you. I'm sorry. Okay, yes, here we go. Item 3A, a certificate of approval request by the City of Palm Springs for stabilization and rehabilitation of the Cornelia White residence, a Class 1 historic site located at the Village Green, Park 221 South Palm Canyon Drive, HSPB number 4. Do we want to have your staff report and then Mr. Roberts?
I'm going to do a very brief introduction,
Okay.
and then I'm going to turn it over to him.
Please.
So as the board knows, this has been a project that the city's been working on for several years. The board has seen this in many different iterations. At your last meeting, the city came forward with an alternative scheme that incorporates many of the details from the various studies and contractors who have looked at it. And the application that's before you is as close to what the board, I believe, was originally desiring this project be. It is quote-unquote a piece-by-piece restoration. However, it's going to be a significant deconstruction of this house in order to accomplish the work that's necessary. And I make that point and emphasize it because when the public sees this house go under construction, it is going to look like the house is being torn down. That is the degree to which the extensive amount of deterioration is going to need to be dealt with. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Roberts.
And JR, just before you start, and Ken, thank you for that, because for those of us who are local and we're going to see this house under construction, we won't be running to the phone to call you in fear of what we see going on.
And I'll get
JR.
into more of the details after his
All right, thanks so
presentation
much.
is done.
We've already warned the police department that the house isn't being stolen if they see all the siding being removed. So I actually, you have an extensive staff report from Ken that I'm familiar with. I'm really here just to answer questions for you. You know, obviously this is going to be a substantial remodel. I feel confident with D.W. Johnson that when the house is done, it will still have its character and its age. But we're doing a lot of work with the idea that the house can live another 100 years, and hopefully we won't have to think about it for another 30 or so.
Well, do we have questions of JR?
I do.
Please, Linda.
And I'm sorry, Linda, also Marcus Fuller is here as well for any deeper questions that, well, you're kind of staffed to death here today, so.
How long do you think it will take from start to finish?
Oh, man, I'm guessing, so
3 or 4
he says
months?
3 or 4, so that means I say
6
6,
months.
Linda. Yeah.
And-
In the real world, 6 months, yeah.
And can we put some kind of signage up that actually explains what we're doing and the procedure so staff doesn't get 1,000 phone calls?
Not only are we gonna do that, I think we're gonna wrap, fence, and maybe we can wrap the project, and we might even put a donation box there.
I think that was my next.
We talked about that because every little bit will help on
Yep.
that house. And I think if we wrap the house with the image, much as the way they do in Italy under Restore, and we'll probably attract some dollars, which is great,
Thank you.
unless Flynn objects to any of that.
It's coming from city council.
Dick, please.
What did the final cost come out to be?
Well, we just got them recently from DW, and it's still an estimate, but we're at about, what, 400?
Yeah.
We're give or take about
That's-
400,000. So let's say that's
know.
going to go up 10%
Yeah.
at least, but it's still a dramatic reduction
Oh, yeah.
from the original million plus
Right.
that was estimated. So we're really excited about moving forward, and we're trying to fast track this to get it done once and for all.
This is exciting. And so it could start when? May 1?
As soon as we can get D.W. Johnson back from Hawaii's project, we can get him started. But I'll let Marcus speak to that.
Yeah, that's the intent, is that we'll bring it forward to council in March, and then we'll have him be able to mobilize, so it's under construction during the summer when they would normally be closed.
Yeah, our goal is to be working this summer on it. So
That's
if we can
perfect.
start in the next few months, that will be ideal. And once we're confirmed, we'll let you know that.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you both for coming at our meeting in January when, this all came together. I think that the board was very, very pleased at this, and let's go forward.
Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you.
And when
Oh,
we'll come and give you periodic reports, and get ready. We're going to the Plaza Theater next.
one more second, please.
Two suggestions. One is to photo document before you begin construction and archive those documents in several places. I'd tent the building if I were you during construction, so it's completely enclosed to protect anything that isn't, when the roof comes off, to protect what's left and might have to be restored. And the other, and I've went through all of this. It's exhaustive.
Thank you, Ken.
You did an excellent job. But how am I going to tell what's new from what's old?
Hopefully you won't know the difference.
Well, no, I'm supposed to be able to, according to the Secretary of Interior standards, I'm supposed to look at that building and be able to tell what was original and what was new.
So what I would say to you on that, in a restoration of this sort, we're not doing an addition to the house. We are what I call doing an honest restoration, where we're replacing rotted materials with new materials. The Secretary of State may say that you should be able to look at that building and recognize those material differences. Frankly, I'm hoping we don't. Frankly, what I'm hoping we're looking at is a building that's aged well, that's aged well and looks fresh. frankly, I'll feel like we failed if you look at the house and can recognize every board or window that got replaced. We're really trying to do something seamless. Unless you guys want to respond beyond that.
I can just speak a little bit. I understand what Bill's point is relative to the Secretary of the Interior standards, because the notion is to not imitate and to not falsify history. In this case, I understand the distinction that JR is talking about as well. This home, when it goes through this reconstruction, rehabilitation, whatever we want to call it, it's going to be tremendously difficult for the new material to match the old, particularly on these railroad ties. And to the extent that we can, that's why I put into the conditions of approval that control samples be set up so that we can understand before the thing gets all put together what this is going to look like. To the extent possible, we're trying to not make this thing look like a patchwork quilt, but it's going to be a patchwork quilt. And ultimately, I think as one looks at the home, once it is painted, it's going to appear as close as possible to the way that it did during its historic period. And I think that through the archival material that you're talking about, I think we can make a legitimate case for the approach that's being taken, that we will be able to identify that which is original and that which has been replaced.
I mean, board for board, most of the siding on that house is going to be replaced. I think every window, pretty much every window is going to be replaced. With respect to replication, we're using wood. We're using the same styles. We're using the same finishes. We're using the same colors. So at the end of the day, the way you're going to know the difference between today and tomorrow is that it's not going to look like it's rotting anymore. I mean, that's really it. I mean, with respect to materials, the materials that are newfangled, so to speak, that wouldn't have been used in that era, will all be under the skin and under the house. And what's there right now isn't exactly original to the house. I can't imagine that the mobile home
Floor jacks.
the mobile home floor jacks were intended by Miss White to hold that house up. So I think if anything, we're going to go more backwards in time than where the house is today. And again, it's the things that would define its restoration are pretty much going to be buried in it.
And to your question about tenting, the roof is actually not going to be removed, so, which is a good thing. So I don't know that we'll have the need to tent it, but we will definitely screen it and fence it so that everybody knows what's happening.
And we'll talk about doing an attractive screening, and maybe we can do the story around the house as well, which will attract people. And we'll talk to you more about that when we get closer to it.
Vincent.
There's extensive documentation from 2016. Prior to construction, will you do photo documentation and any other kinds of recordation of the site as it exists now? So pre-conditions and proposed, existing conditions and proposed conditions. I don't know if the 2016 document will suffice in terms of what exists now, or whether that needs to be updated prior to commencement of construction.
I would simply say that, yes, we will do that. We intend to do that. Staff hears you on that. You know, it's more than a recommendation. It's something that we've already considered. More importantly, we want to leave a clear record of what we've done so that when people are sitting at this table in some future, they can refer to all of that and know what we did to the building and what they might need to do to the building. Do you guys want to respond?
I was just going to say that I would ask Mr. Lyon to go out and take photos before you actually begin the work to document the conditions as they exist currently.
And if you're impressed with what he does in a staff report, wait to see the photo documentation that he does.
Well, what I was also going to suggest is this might be something that we also may want to bring in at the appropriate times, some video recording, so that there's actually, there's more of a story here to this restoration than just, you know, putting up the screen and then taking down the screen and seeing a beautiful thing that's after. This may be actually one of those things that through some video taping of some of the process really becomes a tool that can actually be presented to other cities and other places that are doing this kind of thing. This is going to be a one-of-a-kind project, and we ought to document the daylights out of it, because I mean, when you think of things like This Old House and things like that on television, this is that kind of thing that has that kind of cachet to it, I think.
Ken, on that note, Board, and I'll come back in just a second, but Jerry's walked in. Jerry, if you, just another few minutes. Jerry, if you'd come up for just a second. I know that the Historical Society of late has been conducting some oral histories, have been, your whole talk series this season is being videoed. Is there a possibility that, as Ken and JR are suggesting, a video diary might be organized through the Historical Society?
Yes, that's certainly a good possibility.
All right, because I think that's a terrific idea.
I will check with our cinematographer.
Please, please, I think that's a terrific,
Yeah, we have the camera.
okay.
You know, we're using it for the
All right.
talk series.
Jerry, are you excited about this undertaking?
Thrilled. I'm sorry I was a little late. I had to open up the museums first before I could come, but I didn't get to hear when it was starting.
Soon.
Summer,
Perfect, perfect. Okay.
June 1.
Okay, thrilled. I didn't think I would get to see it in my lifetime. Thank you all. Wonderful report, Ken. It was just so informative and thorough.
And obviously, Gary, we'll work with the Historical Society. I mean, we've got to clear the house of its furnishings, and we don't really have a plan on that yet. So this is where we'll really want Jerry involved to help us, you know, clear and protect the interiors and really document
Yes,
how to
and we've
preserve the
already-
things that aren't going to be touched.
Yeah, we've already documented all the items inside the house, and so that's all on record, and then we're ready. Actually, we had to pack everything up when they put the roof on 2 years ago, so we know what to do with that. And that time, we were able to leave some of the furniture on the inside, but now we know we will not this time.
We're going to need to empty the entire
Yeah.
house.
But as far as all the objects and everything, we've had a dry run, so we can move pretty fast when we need to clear it.
So Jerry, we might have another meeting offline just to really do the plan
Yes.
for the moving.
That'd be great.
Any other questions or comments
I
while we
do.
still have JR and Marcus?
Speaking with Marcus, the chimney was not a part of Johnson's, but I assume that'll just be another professional company that'll deal with the chimney.
You know, we went round and round with that on the structural analysis, and I think that at the end of the day, to structurally support that chimney, we'd have to completely dismantle all of it and retrofit it from inside, and we just felt that that was just too destructive. So to the extent that there's an earthquake and some of that chimney might topple down, at this point, we're suggesting that we're just going to live with that risk. And so it's not part of this scope of this restoration at this point.
Well, there is some work in there to tie it to the house better, but in order to bring that chimney to current codes, we literally have to rip it apart. And again, you know, going back to what Bill was saying, essentially we'd be building a new chimney, and I think we went round and round. We thought, you know, that house was moved with that chimney. That chimney has survived how many earthquakes in its lifetime? And we thought, this is the one area of risk, that in a major quake, that chimney might break. But at that level of quake, we're going to be a lot more worried about other things in this town.
That's great. And back to the videoing, I think we have next year's annual event main focus. It could be the videography of the, I mean, it could just be fabulous, followed by the plaza. We've said we already got next year's going, so always
All right,
thinking ahead.
Anything else for JR or Marcus or, okay, JR, thank you so
You are-
much.
you are most
Marcus,
welcome.
Thank you. Jerry, thank you.
We need a motion?
Yes, okay, so yes,
Okay.
so we've opened the public, no, wait, let me just get back to my right page. Okay, this is on unfinished business. The recommendation is to approve subject to conditions, and so yes, I'll accept a motion on that behalf.
This is not a public
This
hearing.
is, no, this was this is unfinished business. We jumped ahead, Bill, yeah. Okay, so,
I'll move that we approve the certificate of approval, subject to the conditions of the approval outlined in the staff report, in that current representation, videos and photos as exists today be documented.
A second?
okay, I didn't get
Who
the
is
second.
Bill?
Bill? Okay, Bill. All right, any further discussion on that? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to that? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Jerry, I'm glad you made it. Okay. Now we are coming back to item 2B. This is indeed a public hearing. This is an amendment to the Class 1 Historic Site designation for the Oasis Hotel to incorporate the Oasis Hotel Dining Hall located at 219 South Palm Canyon Drive and the commercial storefront and casita buildings located at 121 South Palm Canyon Drive. Designed by Master Architect Lloyd Wright, HSPB case number 10. Ken Line, staff report.
I'll be right with you.
Okay. So I think that many of us here, hopefully all of us, had an opportunity to do the site visit, and truly what a glimpse into the historic nature and the architecture of this terrific property. So certainly I'm very appreciative of the city's efforts to conduct that site visit.
All right.
All right, thank you, Ken.
This is like trying to talk and chew gum at the same time. So as you know, the Oasis Hotel was designed in 1923 for Palm Springs pioneer Pearl McManus. The building was completed in 1925, and it's recommended by many architectural historians as one of the most important works of early modernist architecture in the state of California. On page 3 of your staff report, I want to just point out, if I can get to this, this is what the original hotel was. And I'm going to step up to the screen in just a minute and point a couple of features out and explain to you what's left. And then I'll get into the content of what we're looking at here. So what's important to understand is that, first of all, north is up. This is Palm Canyon, okay? The Oasis commercial building, which was done by E. Stewart Williams in 1953, occupies this area here, okay? So when you used to see the old Starbucks, it was right here. So up here is Tahquitz Canyon Way, and this is the intersection. The Wellwood Murray Library is over here, okay? So what is sitting out there today is this part right there. The shops are still there. The tower is still there. The building that's attached to the tower and this casita building. Everything else on this site plan has been demolished. Originally, when this was built, you see this is labeled as office, and then there were some men's and women's lounges here. Sometime in the future, as you'll see in the photos, it appears that the office was moved into this particular storefront, perhaps because as cars come in here, the passenger would get out here and maybe go in here rather than over there. I can't surmise what was going on there, but this is the part that is under consideration. This is the dining hall. So when you look at what's in the portion of the building that's down at the Village Green Park, it's this piece right here, okay? All of this is gone and has been demolished. This is the original McCollum Adobe, and this is sitting over on the Village Green Park. This predated the Oasis Hotel. This was in approximately 1888, if my numbers are correct. When Pearl McManus envisioned this hotel, she envisioned it as a tribute to her father. She wanted the original homestead to be incorporated. It was incorporated in what was, in this plan is called a card room. So when you look at that scissor truss system in your staff report and in the vintage photos, you're looking right down through here. When you see the one that has the two trees in it, those are the two cottonwood trees that were in place, and the building was built around them. And when you look at the part of the building that is currently the Agua Caliente Cultural Museum's main lobby, it's this right here, okay? So there's a portion of this 90-foot-long dining room that is currently what I refer to as the fudge shop, and then a portion of it is the back area of the museum. And this was taken out of this very linear position when it went down to the Village Green Park and was cocked at a bit of an angle, okay? So, in 1985, the City Council considered a recommendation from the Historic Site Preservation Board to designate this as a Class 1 site. At that time, the City Council designated the tower and the building attached to it. And the staff report noted, quote unquote, that the other portions of the buildings had been significantly altered. However, no analysis was provided to substantiate that assertion. The dining room was not given any consideration at that time. So as part of your 2016 annual work plan, you brought this project forward as a request to amend this designation to consider these other factors, to potentially bring them in as the contributing factors of the project. The city, at your request and as a result of this particular initiative, brought on the firm Architectural Resources Group, which did a study which primarily focused on the portions of the dining hall that are at the Village Green Park. The additional material that I have in here is also some excerpts from a 2004 analysis that was done by Ann Urbas as part of a potential renovation of the building for a restaurant. And I also have included excerpts from a book called The Palm Springs Weekend by Alan Hess and Andrew Danish. So as noted in your staff report, this hotel was conceived as a carefully planned group of buildings encircling the site in the sense like a hacienda. And in fact, on the original drawings, you see at the very bottom there, Wright had originally called it the Hacienda Hotel. The hotel is a combination of wood frame construction and slip form concrete construction. And this concrete construction at its time was considered quite revolutionary. So I want to just go through these slides a minute. This is what I just explained to you. This is what's left. So from this image, everything is gone except this. And of course, the dining hall is at the Village Green Park. This image helps you understand a bit. The top part of this is looking along the Palm Canyon frontage. So if you understand toward the left in this upper image, that's the storefronts building. Then there was the porte cochere under which cars would drive up where it says Entrada, and then you see office, and then the dining hall and the McCullum Adobe at the right. The lower level is looking at this thing from the north. So if you were standing in the paseo between the Oasis commercial building and this portion of the Oasis Hotel, that's what you would be seeing. So in the lower drawing there at the left is the end of the commercial shops. This is the tower shortly after its construction. And as you can see, when I walked all of you through this site earlier last week, the brackets that you see on the tower actually supported a large set of wood lattices. And this wood lattice motif is one that Wright carried throughout the entire hotel. You can see it toward the right in this photo. You can also see it in the railings that are just to the left of the tower. This is an understanding of the connection between the commercial buildings, which is at the left in this photo. You can see a tall little black slot. That slot was just recently, for those of you that toured the site, the shop owner there explained that that had been covered up, and they were able to uncover that, and it's a very narrow slot window. The portion then you see with the little porte cochere and where the word Oasis is, that's where the current Oasis commercial building is. Those portions have since been demolished. This is an artist rendering that Wright did back in the 20s, which helps you understand the proximity of each part of this particular project. And I'm going to just, again, step up real quickly and explain each part so you understand its relative positioning. So in this particular drawing, Palm Canyon is out here. This is the storefronts building. This is the narrow slot through which the Oasis commercial building is here, the tower is here, and the attached building. Off the rear side of this is where the dining room came. This is the McCollum adobe. This is what I refer to as the crossing in the dining hall. And then this would have been the kitchen. So the Casitas building sits back in here. This is another rendering that kind of helps illustrate the context of the dining hall with the tower. As you were looking at the interior of the what is now the Cultural Museum, you saw the scissor truss and you saw the open, almost like clear-story windows. This is an early sketch that Wright did in which he was envisioning how the view of the mountains toward the west might have been seen through that clear-story window in the dining room. These are images of the dining room where it connects back into the covered passage that connects to the tower. So in the lower right picture here, that's, if you guys remember when you walked into the Oasis Tower building, there was an opening that came out the side of it. That's where the dining hall connected. And you can see, again, the use of the wood slats and almost an arts and crafts style stenciling that was occurring on the lintels that also occurred in the storefronts. This is what I refer to as the crossing. And when you go back to that image in which Wright was trying to depict what the view out of that clear-story window might have been, that's the window that he was drawing. The complexity of this crossing I find just absolutely amazing in terms of just the geometry and the complexity of it and how this was conceived to merge these two complicated pieces of geometry. And I think it speaks to Wright's genius in terms of his architectural capabilities. Here you see the dining room when it was in use and its present-day condition. As you can see, and as I explained to you in the field visits, the wood slats that you see in the photo on the left are most likely still present under the drywall that you see in the right. And I believe the drywall probably had to be installed as a health department issue because they do serve food in that space. And then this lastly is simply a compilation to help you understand some of the context within which this all lies. So if you start in the upper left corner, that's the dining hall. Here you see the floor plan that I showed to you in the middle. The arrow is pointing to the dining hall. That's the arrow is where the first picture is taken from. The third picture to the left on the top is an aerial view showing the Oasis commercial building abutting the remnants of the hotel. And then the images below are of the dining hall and then a computer rendering that was done some time ago by a local architect. And again, this is showing that connection between the two, the use of the slats and some of the decorative elements that Wright had brought into the dining room. This is the corner of the commercial building. That's the slot window that was recently uncovered. There again, you can see the stenciling that was also used at the lintels over the entrances that connected the dining hall to the tower. And that's that. So the question that's sitting here in your staff report in the analysis is really going back and looking at each of these components, the dining hall, the storefronts, and the Casita building against the definition of a historic site and against the conditions of integrity. And I'm not going to go through and exhaustively lay all this out for you because I think it lays out fairly clearly, but these buildings, although they have lost the integrity of setting, still possess and are able to convey their historic significance because of the conditions that are on the interior. And it's unusual that you have an opportunity to look at an interior as a possible component of a historic designation. And you're doing so only because the city owns these buildings. So the outside of the dining hall buildings as they sit over at the Village Green, and that which has happened sort of from the ridge point and down, or from the bearing point down of the gables, is really all new stuff. But what you're seeing there in terms of the roof, the scissor trusses, and then that complex crossing area that's in the Cultural Museum, those are the parts that you would be identifying as defining historic characteristics of the Oasis Hotel, okay? I'm going to try to just, I'll answer your questions if you've got any in terms of the analysis on each one of these pieces rather than exhaustively go through them. But I want to get you back then to the position on page 15 where we start talking about defining physical characteristics, the dining hall fragments, the commercial storefronts, and the casita building. And then the non-contributing issues are identified on page 16. Let me now summarize what this is that you're actually considering. The Oasis Hotel is already a Class 1 site. The Class 1 designation applies to the parcel. What you're looking at here is identifying or expanding those components that exist that are contributing to the historic significance of this site. So in its current condition, only the tower and the attached structure are identified as quote-unquote historically significant. But the point that's been brought to you in the staff reports and the ARG report is that the casita building, which is just to the west of the tower, stands with quite good integrity. It's boarded up, but it still has not been destroyed. It still has the slip-form concrete. It still exists as a pretty much abandoned set of 6 hotel rooms. The commercial building at the front, it's the same story. You have a building that's still functioning and it's used for what it was originally designed for. Its exterior is essentially intact. There have been changes in the storefronts that you can see with this sort of a gold anodized bay windows that can be reversed and brought back to the original storefront design if one chose to. The dining hall components you're looking at in terms of recognizing that those are not just a couple of wood frame buildings sitting down there with a fudge shop and a museum in it. Those are actually portions of the Oasis Hotel that were designed by Lloyd Wright. And Pearl McManus, if you read more about her, both in the staff report and the materials I've included, was a pretty interesting character because she owned almost all of that part of downtown at the time. And she found shortly after the construction of the hotel that she couldn't make a go of it, and so she sold it in the 30s. But when she sold it, she retained the right to salvage the buildings if they were to ever to be demolished. So 1952, the Oasis Hotel gets sold to Western Hotels. They devise a plan. They want to take that wonderful corner of Tockwitz and South Palm Canyon, put in a commercial building because the town is really booming. And Pearl raises her hand and says, just wait a minute, those buildings over there, the original ones, are mine. And she takes both the Adobe, which is the original homestead, which is HSPB class number, or building number 3, which is a Class 1 historic site, and she brings the dining hall fragments down and arranges them on what is now called the Village Green in what she imagined to be a group of quaint little shops that could serve as part of the commercial offerings of Palm Canyon. Those are the pieces that currently have no protection to them other than the fact that they are Class 3 by nature of their age. So the recommendation before you is to make a recommendation to City Council that the Oasis Hotel historic site designation be amended to include the casita building, the storefront building, and the dining hall fragments as contributing elements to the historic significance of that building. And with that, I'm going to shut up and answer any questions you may have. And I think we have a representative of the building here, Steve Lyle, who can speak to it. I believe at this point the owner does not support this amendment, and he can speak certainly to that as well. I've had some conversations with him and others from ownership explaining the nature of the designation and the nature of adaptive reuse and the opportunities with Mills Act. So their understanding of it, they're eager to see something happen with this building. They're afraid, and they want to make sure that the actions that the board or the council take place at this time don't block them from having an opportunity to do an adaptive reuse on this parcel. I'll answer any other questions you may have. Thank you.
Ken, thank you. Excellent staff report. Before I will open the public hearing, but we're going to see if the board has any questions of staff at this time. But I wanted to acknowledge staff at this point for this particular staff report. It's the first time that I've seen, and I apologize if you've used it before, but I've not seen computer-generated renderings of what it did look like. This has been fantastic, I think. I mean, the one on page 4 of 17, the computer-generated, seeing the Adobe in place, seeing and then also on page 15 of 17, the computer-generated images by John Anthony Rivera. I think these have been really helpful for me. So.
And those were found on the web, and I did want to make sure I gave credit to him as the person who did create those drawings. The
So
city
you
did
didn't
not create those
request
drawings.
this? These were just out there?
They were out there. When I did Google searches on Oasis, this is what I found. He had a site on the web that had these images on it. It's important to recognize that he is the one that did these images. The city did not.
And staff feels they're fairly accurate to
They seem to be fairly accurate.
use them in
When
the
I
report?
I can't remember the website. I can find it for you if you want, but the understanding I had was that he developed those three-dimensional images by using the original Lloyd Wright drawings.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, any questions of staff? Bill?
It's a question of ownership. The city owns the property, but the tenant objects to the designation.
No, the city owns the parcel on which the dining hall fragments reside.
Okay,
The Oasis Hotel itself, the tower, the attached structure, the casita building, and the storefront building are on a parcel that is privately owned.
okay.
That is
understood.
not owned by the city.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. No other questions of staff at this time? All right, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone in the audience wishing to address the board on this issue, please come forward. Good morning. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning. Steve Lyle, and I've been involved with this building for over 30 years, managing, leasing, and then I was fortunate to get a little piece of ownership with the current owner. And we've been struggling with this part of the property for 30-plus years. What to do with it, trying to make it a part of the property that brings in income and has good aesthetics. And it's really been a problem. I convinced ownership years ago to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to try and develop the property, this portion, into a restaurant concept called Loretta's Hideaway. And we got Historic Site Preservation Board approval for those plans. I'm not sure how long ago that was it?
2005, I think.
Okay, wow, more than 10 years ago. And we actually got to the point of working drawings. We had the air conditioning people, electrical, plumbing, everybody do their homework to figure out how can we work with this slip form construction building to air condition it modern, to bring in plumbing for kitchens and so on. And when we got done with the process and we started to market the property to try to find someone to make this a reality, we started getting into the actual cost to do it. And we had HJH Construction, Hal Hall, do some bidding on it. And he's the one who bought the historic J.W. Robinson building and has since refurbished it and spent a couple million. Well, this building, it costs so much more to refurbish it, to get it to a point where a tenant could even start to work with it. It was a couple million more than we thought. At the end of the day, it was about $4 million to pull off the Loretta's Hideaway plan to convert 8,000 to 9,000 feet into this restaurant bar concept. The landlord was willing to put in excessive tenant improvements to help. Tenant improvements are usually $20 to $40 a foot. This owner was willing to put in $100 a foot, $1 million to give to a restaurateur to try to make this work. And at the $4 million cost, it wasn't nearly enough. And so what I want to impress upon this board is we need help. This is a fantastic piece of architecture. I'm very proud of the buildings, and you know, how can we put this to use? I'm embarrassed with the way it looks. I've been embarrassed for a long time. It's boarded up. It's a homeless problem, nightmare. But I just, if there's a use for Measure J funds or some other kind of funds for the city to help, this is the building, in my opinion, that needs the help. And I don't know how this board can get the message out to those people that, economic development and such, that make these things happen. But there's not a more complicated gem of a building in the desert, in my opinion, that you could help with in this building. And the 18-inch thick walls and such, boy, they're a challenge. And so that's my message today is I'm not fighting this historic designation. I think it's appropriate. But I'm just asking for help. If you can talk about it and support this particular building getting some extra help from the city, and then I'll market it to find the right person to make this happen. But it's a shame the way it's sitting right now.
Mr. Lyle, hold on just for
Yeah.
a second. Any questions of Mr. Lyle? At the time the Loretta's Hideaway was approved, Ken, and you might help me here. The city allows historic properties to waive certain parking requirements. Refresh my memory on that.
That particular ordinance wasn't in place back in 2005, 2006.
Was not.
Was not. But the current ordinances were amended a few years ago that any Class 1 historic site where the use changes and that change of use requires an intensification or a greater number of parking spaces, they do not have to provide that additional amount of parking.
All right. So, Mr. Lau, you know you have that advantage already, yes?
Yeah, and we had proposed to redo the parking lot as part of Loretta's Hideaway and
Okay.
combine it with the adjacent parking lot, close a couple of driveways, and make it flow better for the whole block.
Okay, all right. All right, any questions of Mr. Lau? Linda?
I have a couple. Have you been marketing that property recently? Or have you stopped completely because of the funding and the?
We stopped, especially since I asked Ken when we had the recent meeting on site, what about the conditional use permit? Is it still active after all these years? And he informed me it is not. And so what do we have to market right now? An expired permit that it's just an old building that needs millions of dollars of work now and a complicated process to go through. So it's not being marketed as of now.
Well, and the reason I bring that up, because the excitement of downtown Palm Springs has spread, and the reputation is known throughout the world. I mean, not just the United States. And so I'm curious as to why there isn't any advertising of this parcel that could be a tremendous investment for someone who's got money. And I guess my other question is, have you appeared before the city council or the appeals board or anyone, the economic development, to ask for any type of funding, if anything was available, that you want to preserve this property and you want to market it?
Yeah, we had many meetings with economic development, with city officials, and we asked for financial help, and we were told that there was no money at the time. And we saw all the money go across the street to the Westman project, and it was very disappointing.
So that was how many years ago that you talked to
Over the
them?
last 15 to 20 years, a
But
lot of
nothing
discussion.
recent?
Nothing in the last, I think maybe 3 to 4 years ago, there was somebody interested in the Loretta's Hideaway concept, and they found out the costs were excessive and they just couldn't make sense of it.
Right, but as of the last 4 or 5 years, you have not appeared in front of a board or the council or anything inquiring as to any funding? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
We've continually been asking, but there, you know, we struck out so many times, we've given up.
Don't give up. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Lau, Ted, Todd.
I answer about anything.
Your
That's
twin
fine.
brother,
Ted,
Ted.
Todd, Scott. Have you explored how you might be able to take advantage of historic tax credits in the restoration of the building or the adaptive reuse of it?
We have.
And has that led anywhere?
It hasn't.
Hmm.
It wasn't enough to make it the difference.
Okay. Okay.
On that note, Mr. Lau, Ken?
I just wanted to add, when we finished the tours, Mr. Lyle and I talked about this issue that, you know, they're somewhat in a discouraged state right now. And I said, you know, we have a new director of economic development, we have a new city council. There seems to be, you know, some changes in terms of the interest of how historic preservation influences cultural tourism. And so part of what I mentioned to Mr. Lyle is maybe it's a matter of reconvening some of the new faces and seeing if this has a different way of launching it back in for consideration. I don't know, but it seems like with some new faces in different seats of importance at the city, maybe the conversation should be reopened.
All right. Well, Mr. Lau, if it were up to me, I would certainly greenlight whatever project you had on this property. Whatever influence this board has, I think we're very supportive of the architectural merits, the historic quality of the property. But I would encourage you to seek out some fresh air with our new economic developer and the city council, et cetera, because it is a gem of a property, and I think we'd all like to see it revitalized and thriving. Any other questions at this time of Mr. Lyle? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. I
Thank
will
you.
not give up.
Do not give up. We are still in a public hearing. Anyone else in the audience wishing to speak on this agenda item? All righty, seeing none, we'll close the public comments, the public hearing. Okay, board.
So I actually was remiss. Profound thanks to both Ken and Mr. Lyle for allowing us access. I mean, I had not talked about a gem. I have walked by this building. I sat on this board when we wrote those little blurbs for the exterior, and I've shown that building countless times, and I've walked around the building, and I had no idea that was even there, and I had never been inside, and so thank you very, very much. And I think, frankly, that by itself is a huge start to trying to do something with this building, because I don't know that any of us knew that was even there. Yeah. I mean, we all know what the exterior facade of the tower and the front, you know, which is a little bit of a discouraging sight, but, you know, to realize that all of that is in there, it's just, oh my God. I mean, talk about, you know, hope that something could be done with it, and I think that's a really wonderful start. So thank you for allowing us to see it. That really, we very much appreciate it, and I think also, at least speaking on behalf of myself, we would absolutely welcome some sort of adaptive reuse of that structure. And I hope that maybe because the economic environment that we're in today is different than it was even 5 years ago, maybe something can happen. But thank you for allowing us to see it, both Ken and, you know, Mr. Lyle. Thank you.
One thing. Yeah, on that note, it reminded me when I got once behind the wall that what came to my mind was when I went behind the Berlin Wall. When I'm going to date myself here, but yes, I was able to do that. And it was an amazing experience, except I didn't have to take a bus. That they go underneath the bus with these mechanic carts to check everything. Before you leave, when you get over there, they did the same thing, and you were definitely controlled all steps of the way. But it was a great thrill, be able to get behind those walls, so we do appreciate it very much. And I think you can see the consensus of this board. And I think this is a good opportunity. We've talked about this before. It came up actually with the Racquet Club, is trying to pull together also some resources. And I do encourage you to go back and speak not only to the council, but also to Mr. Verada, and just have those discussions again, because I think it's a new town, it's a new time, and we want to encourage you extremely so. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. I'll entertain a motion. Bill?
I move that we adopt an amendment to the Class 1 Historic Site designation for the Oasis Hotel.
I'll second.
Any fur-
Second.
Any discussion? Ken, you got the first and the second on that, please?
Yes, I do.
All right, any
Mis-
discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
A commendation to staff for an exhaustive and very detailed report. Thank you.
Welcome.
Dick?
Yes, I have one request. Is there a way, Ken, that we could put in this motion that if the fudge shop, the candy shop, if that were to no longer be if it's the drywall was put up there for the health department, I mean, that element is so important of what's being covered up on that ceiling, that drywall comes off. Let's say it's going to be a dress shop or something else. I just think that we are covering up a major important element, interior architectural element in that building. I just wonder if there's a way for us to some way incorporate that.
Yes, we can do that as a recommendation.
Yeah, and I would second that, or certainly support that. If a food service vendor is no longer in there, it becomes a dress shop or a sporting goods store,
Right.
and they come to the city for any kind of remodeling or whatever, that be restored to what we
Right.
hope is under there, under that drywall. So,
Right.
good point, Dick.
Can do.
You feel good with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Any further discussion? First and second on the floor? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lyle, thank you for coming this morning. Okay, board. We have done 3A, so we will move on to 4A, new business. Gergis Yosef, owner for a certificate of certificate of approval for alterations to the Shell gas station located at 2796 North Palm Canyon Drive. Staff report, please.
Chair
Good morning,
Johnson.
David.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair and board members. The request before you is to modify the existing Shell gas station on North Palm Canyon Drive. As you'll recall, the property was designated Class 1 January of last year by the City Council. And the owner, over the past few years, has been going through steps to make some revisions to the property, which ultimately led to the designation last year. And now they are bringing forward the kind of what their vision is for the interior space to remodel as essentially removing the parking bays and remodeling that to be convenience and retail. So as a part of that change, they are replacing the entry door, which I'll go through here on the slide. What you have on the top is the existing elevation as it is today, and the bottom shows the proposed front elevation. So you see they are replacing the single entry door to the dual entry doors, the double doors on the bottom. They are also removing the parapet on the upper facade. I spoke with the applicant before the meeting, and so one thing to note that my understanding of what is shown here is actually going to be slightly different. The parapet above the storefront glass would also be removed.
Okay.
So that doesn't reflect on this drawing, but that is what I'm told by the applicant this morning, and he would be able to confirm that if he is given the opportunity to speak.
David, not to interrupt you, but I did want to hopefully get clarification on that on the lower proposed front elevation, the parapet above the new entry that comes in front of the windows, yes. But now, with all due respect to the applicant, can we be assured of that as opposed to him telling us that that's what's going to happen? Okay. And then all of the equipment that is on the roof there?
There's, that,
Mr. Youssef, just a sec.
so that will be removed. So there are 2 units, and that's actually incorrectly noted in my report. On the roof plan that you have, there are showing, yeah. But I just wanted to show this exhibit real quick. The 2 rooftop units that are there now will be removed, to answer your question. But to go back to what you see currently, they would remove all of that, and you would be able to see the underside of the canopy in greater detail.
David, hold that for a second. Linda?
Just so I'm clear, that parapet was added, it's not part of the original structure?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
David, not to slow your presentation down, but obviously this is of great interest to most of us and many of us. With the inclusion of the convenience store now, will these appliances here in the front go away?
I'm not sure. I
Okay.
have to ask the applicant
All right.
to clarify that.
Can you go back, sorry, can you go back to the first drawing that you showed us? So, I'm confused.
Your mic.
Todd,
David.
it's your mic.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. I don't see the relation, there's like things on that and the photograph that don't match.
Okay.
So, like, there's windows above the parapet in the illustration that aren't in the photograph. There's windows, it looks like a brick, a lower part is brick or something in the photograph, that looks like it's glazing.
So I'll have to ask the applicant to clarify some of that, but my understanding, what you have here, instead of it showing the package unit that's above the window, or the door, it's showing it as a window.
Well, no, so look at the photos, see
Right.
where those 2 chairs are?
Good.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
And so
That looks like
that-
it's brick or solid.
I think that is a metal panel. So I'll have to get clarity as to whether or not that would be returned to glass or not.
Okay, so that was added and it's coming off.
That's my understanding, unless
Okay,
you can clarify, the applicant can clarify otherwise.
okay.
So that would be restored to a window.
But then looking at the parapet that has the word snack shop on it now, then go back to your drawing.
See, it's there.
It looks, but, so there's windows. but
Those are the windows in the background.
Which we will
Oh.
see.
That's why I'm,
Yeah.
So they're way far behind.
oh,
Yeah,
that's
so let
why
me
I'm-
see, I may have some other
okay,
photos that
thank
show
you.
it.
That's, okay, that makes more sense.
So you can kind of see it here, they're further back
Got it, okay.
from that,
So nothing's being added to that front facade,
correct.
just taking away the parapet?
Taking away the
and taking
parapet.
away the metal facing that's at the lower part?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so they're, as I said, they're replacing the entry door, they're removing the metal parapet on the upper portion of the storefront windows and the block wall. They are removing the package units on the roof, so there's 2. The one that you see here on the photo on the right, you can briefly see it, or kind of barely see it there above the parapet. You know, obviously with the parapet being removed, it's of great interest to have that unit removed as well. So what they're doing is they're replacing those to a ductless system at the back of the building. And so it would be at the back in this, so on the top left photo, you see an outdoor storage area that's surrounded by essentially a block wall that is as tall as the garage door. So it would be located in that area. And what they are also doing as a part of the overall kind of package for site lighting is they are removing all of the appended light boxes attached to the underside of the canopy and retrofitting the existing light troughers that are there. Show you. So what you see here are the troughers that are highlighted in red. Those are the ones that would be retrofitted, and then the yellows are what is within the actual building itself. So those are not being retrofitted. But the ones that you see in red are all being retrofitted. They are adding 2 additional light troughers at the very westerly end of the canopy, so that's shown on the right side of this drawing. So that, in order to do that, they are requesting to saw cut into the canopy at the end here to install lighting to really provide light and illumination for the pumps at the edge of this, at the edge of the space.
David, just for clarification, these photos can't be December the 2nd, 2018.
No, this is 12th of February.
Date and month are reversed.
Thank
So
you.
these,
All right, I got you.
some of these photos are from this year.
No, understood,
February,
understood, okay.
And some are actually from February 15th.
Think, just want to, checking my eyesight, it's just checking eyesight.
Okay, so this just really kind of shows some of the detail of the underside of the canopy. And of course, they're not touching the existing doors that are there for the service bays. Those would essentially remain in place. And so lastly, they are also doing some upgrades to the landscaping. But before I get into that, I just highlight these are the new freestanding light fixtures that are proposed to provide illumination around the site.
Do we have a visual on what that fixture will be?
It's just your standard light pole. I think it's. I don't think they have a. They never.
Bill,
gave
what's
us a
the
detail.
standard for it?
I have catalogs.
So yeah, like I said, lastly, they are upgrading the landscaping to. They are retaining the existing olive trees that are on site.
Oh, thank you.
Right, it's in the detail there. So they are retaining the existing olive trees that are there on site. They are adding some Palo Verde trees at the rear of the property for some of the parking areas. And they are installing some desert-appropriate landscape materials, all of which are found in the desert, this Coachella Valley Water District Slush and Efficient Handbook that we reference. So the plant legend is shown on this slide here, and the rock that's being proposed is also shown. So when we evaluated the project, we essentially went back to what the council designated as contributing and non-contributing elements of the site, and those are all listed on pages 3 and 4 of your report. We felt that the changes would, as it relates to the storefront entry door, would not impact the character defining features, as it was part of the addition that had occurred. So we did not feel it would be have an impact to those features. We did have some concerns with the 2 new fixtures that would be installed at the ends of the canopy. Shown on the right side of the screen, the 2, just for the fact that they are adding 2 new penetrations to the canopy. So the applicant, I know, is saying that they really need those lights, so I know that they may have some comments about that, and would still request that the board approve those fixtures and their location, and also to match the others that are shown on the plan. But staff is recommending approval of this certificate of approval request to the board, with the exception of those 2 light troughers.
So you're not recommending
those 2?
Those 2, okay. Any questions of staff?
I do.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I'm going to ask Mr. Youssef to come up as well.
Pardon?
I'm going to ask Mr. Youssef to come up, so we might
Oh,
hear
yeah,
from the
go,
applicant
yeah.
first.
Okay, sure. Go ahead, do that.
Mr. Youssef, would you like to come up, please? You see, if you were sitting in the front row, then I could hear your aside comments better. But from the back of the room.
It's his nap time.
All right, please, please reintroduce yourself to us, please.
My name is Mario Barati.
Mario, good morning.
Good morning. I think we all met at one time or
Yes,
another up at the
yes.
project. Yes.
Very nice to see you again.
Good to be here.
Okay.
Hopefully-
David, if you could go back to the very first rendering, please. Yes. So, Mario?
Yes.
Mario. So we're looking at something that the lower drawing, we're told, is not actually representative of what will be. So what assurances can you give this board, if they are interested further, of removing that panel above the new storefront to expose Cody's original pop-up clear story windows?
Okay. The parapet, all of it is coming off to be able to show the higher part of the roof. And that is one of the things that we had talked to Dave about it, and we want to put lighting on the inside to where the roof would actually shine. You know what I mean? It'll be seen through the new glass that goes around. I believe we had this conversation when we were up there as far as replacing the glass around it. Many of you guys suggested single or dual pane, whatever way we wanted to go, to be able to show all that. So that parapet is coming off. You got my word on that?
Okay.
And everything else that it's on the roof, it's coming off.
Okay.
We want a clear look and be able to see what the design originally was without whatever they done on the bottom of it. But the roof is the main design on this
Element.
building, and we want to show it.
On
Mr.
this photo,
Sorry if I might just interject. Because this is not shown in the drawings, but the applicant has offered this to remove that parapet, what we would want to do is in the conditions of approval indicate that the parapet would be removed from the front of the convenience store.
and can we note that now?
We can note that now. and
Okay, thanks.
I'll have Mr. Newell include that in the conditions of approval.
All right, thanks, David. Mario, to Todd's point, where the two chairs are, that's a panel now in front of some glass,
No.
but that will all be
right
glass?
there? Okay. Let's step back a little bit. That place has been robbed 4 times in the last month. So that's painted glass. Okay?
Okay,
So once that gets all cleared up, it'll all be glass again. And
Okay.
hopefully we can have less of a break-in. 4 times in 1 month, that's a lot. With
that
the
is a
gun.
lot.
So we need to brighten it up a little bit to where people can be seen. It's kind of the far end of town, easy getaway. It's the last stop. People figure, hey, let me get some cash and leave town because nobody's gonna see me.
Wow.
So it's kind of that's what we're dealing with up there. But that is glass. And that door has been changed 4 times in the last month because of break-in.
Wow. Well, I empathize, I do. I'm sorry about that. And the two appliances sitting here, one of them is ice and the other one might be a propane
Yes.
something. Those are going away?
The ice will go away. The propane, we might put it on the other side because there is a propane tank that they service.
All right. Those are my questions. Anybody?
Yeah, the lighting inside, when the parapet's removed, what lighting will there be inside? And the reason I'm asking that, I still have visions of J.W. Robinson building and the Bevmo there, and it really is quite distracting. So
It will not have that. As I talked to Dave this morning, we suggested that from the height of the wall on the inside, we put up lights, so that way you don't see them. It would only shine on the ceiling, but you don't see lights like a fluorescent light. There will be no fluorescent lights
Okay.
on that ceiling at all.
all right, so we can incorporate that as part of
Condition of approval.
any motion, right? Okay, that's important. Also, on the service, so you're now going to go in and you're going to expand into what's now the service automobile area,
Correct,
right?
yes.
Okay, so on the north side of the building where those doors are, what happens to that area? Because I don't see that anywhere on the plans.
I don't quite follow.
David, can you get to the north elevation of the building showing the existing garage door,
Oh,
please?
the garage door?
Yeah,
Okay, the garage door is gonna stay,
There.
and we are gonna put a wall on the inside of it.
okay,
So
All
the
right, so-
door will stay there, just like it's
right, okay,
for the garage, because that's part of the original building. And we
Right.
had talked about that
Okay.
before to keep it that way.
And David, while you're on this slide, we're showing the extreme west end of the canopy. And this is where 2 new proposed troughers, is that the correct term? Troughers are proposed that staff is not in favor of. Okay. Board?
I'll pick the.
Well, no, let's hear from
I have
Mr.
no
Kaiser.
problem with it.
I
mean,
have,
if-
and I have a question about the reason
Okay,
behind
let's
it.
have let's have Dan.
Well,
Please, Dan.
if you look at it, they want light on this side of the gas tanks, which are out there, which sounds like a practical, necessary solution. And then you hear with, the break-in problem there, the additional illumination, I think is absolutely essential. And at least it's done in the spirit of what the original was, so I have no problem with it.
Dan, thank you for that. So I guess, David, what we're looking at, and then Linda, I'm going to come to you, is in the upper right photograph, is that an existing already? That's existing, so 2 new of those?
Correct.
Okay. Linda?
So the lights on the lower pictures, are those, will go away?
Yes.
Yes.
And they'll have the nice long lights?
They'll have, correct, the same size, as much as possible without, as I understand it, without
Right.
interfering with the X bracing that you see there.
The reason for that, if I may,
Wait a minute.
Yeah, please. Thanks, Ken.
okay, on this side of the pump, there is no lighting at all. It's dark.
On the inside of that
On the
pump?
outside.
I
On the
agree with you.
outside.
I agree with you, because I
So,
shopped there.
Yes, and between the 2-pole light, freestanding lights that are out to the west side on Palm Canyon, between the pump and where those lights would be, it's about 25, 30 feet. So you don't get the light from those poles to come there. So at nighttime, it's kind of a dark spot. So that's why we want to put the lights. And we want to make sure that whatever goes inside here matches out here. It all look the same.
And another problem you have is on those pumps, the sun reflection, you can't see
In the afternoon.
during the day.
Yes.
Bill, please.
I'm looking at sheet E 1.0. And if one were to draw a reflected ceiling plan of the braces, these light fixtures really don't fit.
Bill, draw our attention, please, again.
Sheet E 1.0, the lighting plan.
Oh, 1 second.
All the way at the end, big long ones at the end.
Oh, okay, thanks. Okay, thank you, Bill. Please
If
continue.
one were to draw the braces, the X braces supporting the canopy, these light fixtures won't fit.
Mario, do you understand the
Yes,
the
yes,
comment?
I do,
Can
because
you
we
address
talked
that,
about,
please?
okay, the light fixtures that are going in are not gonna be as long as what the trough that it's up there, so that whatever gets cut does not have to be as big as the other one. What we're gonna do is line up all the lights, okay, but the original cut that it's there, they're what, 8 feet, I believe? Yeah.
A question, back to the storefront, when, excuse me, when this is glass again, what's going to be behind the glass? Is it going to be merchandise racks, the back side of?
Probably, yes.
Probably, yes. So we're
Yes.
going to be seeing the back side of merchandise racks. And how tall are those racks? They're about
You guys
5
could
feet
put a
right
limit.
now.
You know, depends what goes on there, probably 4.5,
Yeah.
5 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, keep that thought when we come to, okay? So if I understand correctly, the 2 new troughers that are proposed are shorter than the existing ones.
That's, as my understanding, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
They
So
don't
the-
make a light that it's gonna fit in there for what they have up there. So we wanna put all the lights, they're all lined up, and if there is left opening on the trough that exists, then we would take care of it to block it up, to cover it, paint it, whatever we gotta do to all match the ceiling, or put cement in there to all match. But they don't make a light that it's gonna be 8 feet long, the size that it is up there, to be able to fit in there.
Okay.
So that's why we're gonna go smaller, okay, to where we can fit everything and everything will line up.
Please.
On that, how are you going to get power to the new fixtures?
How,
Well-
from the roof,
Yeah, from the top of the roof or from underside?
from top the roof.
Okay, thank you.
Todd?
So, what's the roof made of?
Concrete.
Okay, so you're talking about saw cutting a structural element of the roof, like troughs, and I guess my concern is causing some sort of detriment to the structural integrity of the roof by saw cutting into it. I'm really concerned about that.
I would be too, but, we,
Only that thick, what do you mean?
yeah, it's,
Exactly. What do you mean, the roof or the?
Yeah, you're gonna saw cut that entire depth to stick a light fixture in?
Bill, you're not as concerned?
Oh, you're being facetious. Okay.
no.
Well, no, so I am really concerned about somebody, oh, whoops, we cut too deep. Oh, whoops, when we jackhammered the part out, we jackhammered
No,
too
well,
deep.
We're not gonna use a jackhammer to start
Well,
with.
no, but so I guess I personally would, I understand you needing lights, totally get it. I personally would rather have you leave the structure intact and surface mount a light. I
That's,
mean, I may be the only one here that thinks that, but
No. Ken?
I just want to mention something, because I've had this conversation with the owners several times. These are where these existing troughers are, and they're 8 feet long. They're replacing these with LED, right? These can go in as LED strips and be 8 feet long and get the light that they want. And that's what I think we were recommending, is that the LED replacement fixtures that go in the existing troughers are 8 feet long. They look just like a fluorescent. They'll have a face on them, but they're brighter. This same detail can occur out here on this face without cutting into the canopy. In other words, by framing this out with steel and then setting that new light fixture in, they can get the additional light they need by bringing this canopy out about 6-8 inches and achieve what they need without cutting into the structure and getting the light that makes this a safer place.
Ken, may I approach while you're standing there? I'm coming up there. All right, so instead of here and in here, staff is suggesting that they go out here?
That's correct.
All right.
It lies on this structural bay. I mean, what's really important here is that you recognize these are structural bays. And so if this is where the slot happens, the next slot would happen here, not chopped into here.
or the circle mount, like you suggest.
So
the
you
circle
you
mount.
basically almost create like a light valance, and then that thing would sit up in there, and then the face would look just like this.
Okay.
It's still a yellow strip across the front, but there's a light tucked in behind it.
Well, I would ask Ken then, or David, what do we think that extension to the canopy is? 6 inches, 8 inches?
6-8 inches?
Please.
It would need about either 3 to 4 inches for the light trough for a standard fixture, and then you'd want to create a sheet metal fascia over the top. So that should have at least, a framework and an inch and a half to 2-inch return.
When you look at LED strip, the strip, it's a 1/2 inch wide.
Understood.
And that 1/2 inch wide strip will put out more output on light than a fluorescent light will.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Linda. Oh, okay.
That's the existing.
I got you. Yeah. Linda.
Did I miss this in the staff report, this suggestion, or did you not have this discussion prior to this meeting?
This is the first we've had this discussion.
Okay, so we did, staff
It's not
did
part
not
of the report.
suggest, I'm sorry?
It was not part of the report.
The extra, okay.
Right.
The extra
Yeah.
lights were, but not the suggestion to put them at the end of the canopy.
Right, not an alternative mounting method. It's not in the report.
Okay, thank you.
I want to clarify, that was something that I'd had conversations with the owner back when we were first talking about the designation.
And then David, on with the removal of the big square boxes now, that underside canopy gets restored and
Painted,
will look like they've never been there. We
That's-
won't see junction boxes.
That's the goal, correct.
Okay.
I think all the junction box stuff is great.
Yeah. All right. So, board, I think that we know that staff did not approve or suggest that these new troughs be cut in. Todd's point was very well made about what potential damage might occur. And so the proposed light trough to be added to the far west end of the canopy. Bill, your final thoughts on that, please?
I've got several, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, the lighting as proposed is not acceptable. It needs to be concealed, as was suggested by staff, as being a way of both lighting the site and lighting the area in question in a meaningful way. This canopy should not be standing by current engineering standards, so you do not want to touch it at all, period. Even to core it, I'd be scared of coring that top.
Okay.
And so you don't want to diminish that structural thickness at all. So the staff's recommendation of perimeter lighting is a great one, actually. I wish I had thought of it. It also allows you to get wiring to those lights without coring through the canopy by coming up a sidewall and running it around the whole perimeter. It's going to give you some great advertising because it's going to really light that station up really coolly. I'm concerned. We deal with gas stations all the time, and while you're lucky you don't have to make this look Hispanic, what happens behind the glass can be really ugly. So when you say it's glass, it's really ugly. It's the back end of merchandise and I've been in your store several times. I get my propane gas there. I was very concerned that was not going away. So the way to deal with it is to either put spandrel glass or a spandrel panel, which is a piece of metal or a piece of glass that's opaque, and or paint the back black, so that the glass looks like it does. And it does need to be about 4.5 to 5 feet high because that's how tall the stuff is behind it. But I'm also concerned about, okay, we've got drawings that show the parapet there. I really want to know what it looks like with the parapet gone. Is it going to be a fascia panel? What's it going to look like? And we don't have drawings that show that. And so, while I really want to see this project move forward, we've been talking about it like forever. I don't think we have an approvable proposal in front of us today.
Mr. Chair, might I offer a suggestion? Would it be appropriate to have a subcommittee of the HSPB review the final drawings rather than coming back to the entire HSPB? This is something
Yes.
that we often use at Architectural Advisory Committee and Planning Commission, where there are conditions associated with it, but they want to see how those conditions are actually applied in terms of drawings.
Flynn, Mr. Lavoy and Mr. Hayes will
Just
serve on
volunteer.
that. Ken?
I think that's a great idea.
I do too.
I wanted to just mention, as I was, as you were discussing, I was having a conversation with Mario. The question that you asked is what's happening behind the glass. Well, behind the glass is merchandising, but it's not the back of the merchandising. There are going to be merchandise cabinets in there, but along the glass, it's going to be an aisleway.
Right.
And so the point that's important, I think, to also make on this, which is critical, is that if you remember back to the original drawings that were presented to you when this building came up for possible Class 1 designation, that was floor-to-ceiling glass. So what you have right now is an opportunity for the building itself to come back as closely as possible to what this thing was originally. And I think it's just a matter of how you set those interior caseworks so that that glass is able to actually come all the way to the floor. It's a tremendously powerful opportunity right now that they're about to pose to you to bring this as close to the original building as you've ever seen it, which is very exciting.
And Ken, on that note, Mr. Youssef, I read recently 7-Eleven, their success in avoiding robbery has been the visibility from the outside into the store, and they're purposeful, not blocking windows with advertisements, with showcases and that type of thing. So I think, yes, if you can keep your cabinet or the showcases away from the window, and that will certainly create a much more visual interconnection with the outdoors.
We can organize inside
Yeah, Ken, do you mind giving Mr. Youssef the, thank you.
Can I sit in? Oh. No, I'm just kidding. We can organize the inside as, any which way we want to organize it. It doesn't have to be the back of the merchandise or anything like that. We're gonna have a lot of room inside, so we don't need. What I'm doing right now, we have everything faced in a small area and facing the back, just because they break in every. I have broken 4 times last month. Robbery with a gun, 4 times. It's all in the police report. It's not safe. We'll organize the inside as much as we want. We can make it visible. You're right. So you can see from the outside, inside, and from outside, inside too. Outside, it makes a lot of sense.
Okay, good. Todd?
So what would be helpful for us when it comes back before the subcommittee is if you could do a schematic of the inside of the store, just the front of it, just a line drawing. We don't necessarily.
I can't tell you how it's going to look like
yeah,
inside.
no, but it would be helpful for us, to understand that the shelving inside will be 4 feet away from the front glass.
It's inside is kind of mess right now. We don't know how it's going to look like.
Right.
I'm not a contractor. I'm a gas man, and I don't have that vision. How it's going to look inside after we do the...
Mr. Youssef, we can assist you in terms of doing
Yeah.
the layout of a floor plan. That's essentially what they're looking for.
Yeah.
So
We're happy to.
we'll
I
assist
think
you.
I have one more question of Mario and staff. With the proposed additional lighting on the trim on the western edge of the canopy, the distance between what will be the restored troffers to this lighting out here on the trim now, the distance there, is it going to create a dark spot though? If we look at this, the distance between the two troffers there and the new proposed one out on the rim.
They're equal.
They're
They will be?
equal. That's
Okay,
the center.
no, I can't see that from here, but okay, I'm happy with that.
We had at one point also suggested uplighting from the pumps to light the hole underneath of the canopy.
Wow. That's not
Thank
enough
you, Mr.
lighting.
Youssef, for coming this morning.
You're welcome, but it's not enough lighting. We need more lighting.
Yes, of course. All right. Any further questions of Mario or Mr. Youssef? Okay, thank you very much. So we did form a subcommittee to look at this before final approval, is that correct?
You will condition your approval today, and then the subcommittee will confirm that the revised drawings match your conditions of approval.
Okay. If there's no further questions of staff or discussion, motion?
If I can just
Please.
clarify your conditions of approval as we've discussed them so far. Number one, the parapet will be removed over the storefront, the 1984 storefront, which is not shown currently in the drawings. And so that's something that we want to see represented before the subcommittee. Number two, there is to be no exposed light source on the interior light fixtures. That was from Mr. Burkett with a concern of the clear story windows that we would have exposed light sources there. Mr. Lavoie had indicated that the light troffers that they were proposing on the western edge of the canopy not be allowed, but rather the lighting should be concealed at the perimeter of the canopy. And then also there was a desire on the part to have some type of a layout on the interior showing what happens behind the glass. And there was a concern that either we would see the back of the displays, but what we're talking about instead, as you've mentioned, Mr. Johns, is that, again, you keep the glass floor to ceiling, and so there's visibility into the store. And then finally, the subcommittee would then review and make sure that the final plans that are submitted conform to the conditions of approval imposed by the HSPB.
And Flynn, if I could, may I ask that those two appliances, the ice maker and the propane tank dispenser, be in a less highly visible location?
Okay.
Dick?
That was one I was going to mention.
Thanks.
The existing garage door? The existing garage door to remain?
That's already in the
So we've
approving
already got that,
resolution,
right?
so you don't need to include that in your motion today.
Okay, good.
There was discussion about restoring it, the storefront system to the original design of floor-to-ceiling glass, single pane.
You got that?
You get that?
Okay. Anybody else?
Just maybe a correction on page 7 of the staff report. Under environmental assessment, it refers to Topwish Plaza. I think that's a mistake.
Vincent, say it again, please.
Under environmental assessment on page 7 of the staff report, it refers to the proposed alteration of Topwish Plaza rather than the Shell.
Oh, good, very good.
Gas station.
A little cut and paste error.
Yeah.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, and so we...
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Second.
And there's our second. Mr. Lavoie and Ms. Dixon.
And who is our subcommittee?
Mr. Lavoie and Mr. Hayes.
Okay.
All righty, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Nay. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Nice job. Nice job. Okay. Okay, that's 4A. 5 discussions. Dick, 2018 National Preservation Month Symposium. Oh.
Okay, just to make this easy. What we've done is just recap, actually, the program. Everything's in order now. In green, there's a couple things to highlight. There aren't that many. The after-event celebration at 8:49. I worked that out with Willie yesterday, and they're willing to do the same thing that they did last year, which we have a no-host bar, and the host will actually donate, if you will, and do a presentation as they did last year, which was absolutely outstanding. And Dan, I'll catch up with you about that, a note on that afterwards, another thought that I have. And then the other big thing is on day 2, the workshop for the Board of Realtors, which is in discussion. I'm going to ask Vince to make just a few comments here in a moment. But in that regard, I've been working with President-elect Lucio Bernal about this project, He's very, very excited about it. And he feels that, and they're going to have a board meeting next Tuesday, and that will be on the agenda to decide to bring in the CPF workshop. And that workshop is based upon what they did in Pasadena, which Todd brought to our attention as well, and Vince will speak a little bit to that. And then on the tours on the next page, we now have our 9 tours, the last 2 being a Palmer and Kreisel in Las Palmas. I forget, Barrett residence, strike that, please. That's in the wrong place. Scott Hunt is the owner. I've known Scott for many, many years. I used to represent his Panache furniture line in Chicago, New York, and Florida in our showrooms. And he has a really fabulous Palmer and Kreisel in Las Palmas. And then the William Holden estate, and I guess we should refer to it now and take the Barrett residence out when we do our marketing, or should we leave that in? Just a question.
Flynn.
It's up to you all, but we would want to say deep well residence.
Yeah, that's what we should change that. Okay, so that gives us our complete completed tours. Then I'm going to turn over to Vincent just to tell you a little bit about the workshop.
So on Monday, April 16th, would follow up with a real estate workshop, and this would be sponsored by CPF in conjunction with the City of Palm Springs. And I'm in discussions with CPF to follow the model that was done in Pasadena last year. It's a half-day workshop from 9 to 12, targeted to real estate agents actually now through the valley, because I understand there may be a merger of the real estate associations. One of the speakers that has agreed to come speak is Scott Anderson, who does the Mills Act contracts for the County of Riverside, and he's really a great resource. CPF might bring one of their attorneys to talk about easements, but Palm Springs at the present time doesn't really have easements, so there has to be a nonprofit preservation organization that would accept easements. And then staff would be involved. Potentially the site would be the convention center. And then I might add, we're still in discussions with OHP to do their workshop here in Palm Springs, and the potential dates for that are either May 4th or May 11th. It's be a Friday. And they would do the marketing. It would be targeted more towards Southern California preservations and organizations, and here in Palm Springs, and the site, again, to be determined potentially, but the Frank Sinatra Auditorium or the Convention Center. So there's actually going to be three events that we're sponsoring in the next couple of months. Thank you.
Thank you. Dick?
That's it.
Okay, excellent. Looking forward to another very exciting event. Thank you for that. Number 5B, Ken, please. This is the HSPB participation at the citywide 1 PS Neighborhood Picnic.
Yes, thank you. We received an invitation from Denise Goolsby with neighborhood organizations as to whether or not the city's Historic Site Preservation Board would like to have a table at the annual picnic. And so we wanted to bring this to the board and get your decision on whether you wanted to do this or not. And of course, tied with that question would be who would be able to help staff that booth. It's an afternoon event that runs from 11 a.m. until 2 p.m. on March 24th at Ruth Hardy Park. And all of the different neighborhood organizations and city organizations are there. They have usually food and drink. It's quite a lot of fun, and you meet a lot of your neighbors, and and fellow participants in many of the other city boards and commissions. So we're looking for direction from the board on this.
Board?
Did we participate last year?
Let's see, actually, we didn't participate last year, but the 2 years previous to that, we did. I did it by myself one year, and then Dick Burkett came out with me one year.
Right. Gee, I mean, so is it dependent on us having some volunteers to staff it?
Yes.
Can I assign on this? No, I wouldn't, but.
Yeah, I will just tell you from my experience, it's kind of hit and miss in terms of the value of having HSPB there at the picnic. I thought the first year there seemed to be more interest in it, and people took our flyers and things like that. The second year, we didn't really attract people to our booth, so.
Okay.
Is that why we didn't do it the third year?
Yes.
Okay.
You weren't giving anything away.
I wasn't giving anything away free.
Well, I think the board is willing to not participate in this event. I don't see anyone, no.
Mr. Chair, I think with the fact that this board is doing a symposium less than a
Exactly.
month later, I think that we're offering a lot to the
Okay.
residents, and
All right.
they pretty much know what they should know about us.
Yes, so then I would say no to participating in
Very
the
good. Thank
citywide
you.
1PS neighborhood.
Thank you.
On 5C, I know that this is a very important issue, and I'm very excited to get into the discussion on it, but I'm wondering if the board would allow, approaching the noon hour, that we table this to the next meeting? Is that okay? Flynn, is that all right with you? Do you? Okay. So do we need a motion on that or anything? We'll just table it to the next meeting? Okay, thank you. All right, so then board member comments. I had one that I'd like to really begin a conversation about this. I feel very, very comfortable that the Cornelia White House will see the light of day. It's been a long, arduous task that this board has undertaken. And so as Mr. Roberts commented when he left onto the La Plaza Theater, I would like to raise the Francis Stevens School Auditorium. I have lived here 12 years, and I went to an event there recently, and I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed that this city-owned property, one of our Class 1 historic properties, is in the, I'll choose my words very carefully, in a not well-kept or well-maintained condition. I know it's always about the money, but with some power washing of the walkways, of the pavers, so that the gum and the old paint and just the dirt be removed. I took some photographs of literally the trash container where before you go into the theater you would dispose of your drink or your coffee cup. It is, and this is not, choosing my words carefully, disgusting. And how nobody who works there or volunteers there or who operates there has not brought this to our attention, that I had to see this firsthand. So it needs some attention. The auditorium was not in great condition. It was a very successful production. It was a hardworking group of volunteers and people, and we have to put some emphasis. We talked about the landscaping recently, and we tripped all over ourselves, whether it was red rock or green rock or white rock. And here the cobwebs in the windows and in the over the paseo as you walk to the auditorium. You know, I don't think we should be tripping over landscaping when the building is just lacking maintenance. So it needs some attention.
We'll bring that to the attention of facilities.
Thank you. That's what I got. Anybody else? Board comments? Todd?
So I don't know if we want to move this to next month. I just want to bring up my little pet peeve of the markers for our Class 1 sites taking over a year to get placed. I'm going to continue to bring it up. I know that staff is burdened and overworked. Part of our charge is to educate. And I think it's a really wonderful opportunity that when thousands of people walk by these sites on an annual basis, and we're about to have 100,000 people in town, not having these sites that we work so hard to preserve not marked and anonymous does ourselves and our efforts a disservice. It also does the people who visit these sites. And I think it's thousands, if not tens of thousands of missed opportunities for us to educate the people that walk by these sites. And so I guess my goal is to find a solution to get them marked more quickly. And so if that's us participating differently or doing something.
Well, you'll be happy to know.
Uh-oh.
You'll be happy to know that I submitted 12 markers this past week, including yours on Bella Vista 2. And I actually have one that's already ready to pick up. So I appreciate you lighting a fire under me on this. It's not lost on me. I understand the urgency of it, and there should be a bunch of them starting to come out now. You bet.
And on that note, the Dr. Hugh Stevens house on Morongo Road, 645 Morongo Road, that has sold. Mr. Metcalf no longer owns the home.
Okay.
It is under new ownership. I have spoken with her, and she will do whatever she can to fast track getting the plaque on that one. And I know that the previous owner was, to his own admission, dragging his feet on that. So,
if you can give me their contact information, I'll
indeed.
reach out to them.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
Staff, site visits. Why do you always schedule site visits on the week that I'm out of town?
It's intentional.
Yeah, I know. And I've missed some places I really wanted to see. If you could give us more than 2 days' notice and not always in the same week, so it's like a Thursday and a Tuesday.
We will try our best.
Please.
One of the things you all have to understand is it's difficult to coordinate the schedules of 7 people, some of whom are not full-time residents. So it's very challenging for us. I just want you to understand that, but we will try and accommodate your schedules as best as we possibly can.
I'm only out of town 2 days every other week.
And we've made it those every... I do apologize for that. We had one staff member retire. We had another staff member out on injury, and we had a new staff member who was doing it for the first time. So we had a learning curve there, but I totally appreciate your comments, and we'll do our best in the future.
Dick?
Just a couple of things. Thanks, Todd, for bringing that up about the markers. I know Ken is tired of hearing me talk about it, so at least it's a fresh new blood. Thank you very much. So now I can tell the people at La Serena and the people at Village Manor and Orbit Inn that things have been ordered, right? So about approximately any kind of time, I know that'll be the next question, so when?
I don't know that yet. I don't know that yet.
You'll know soon.
I will hopefully know before the next meeting.
Okay, very good. That sounds good. My other question is, the racket club seems to still be lingering as to city council. Any new movement on when you think that might be?
Probably March.
Okay. So that's not far away, so that would be...
No, it's not.
That would be very good.
Yeah.
So, okay, thank you.
Vincent?
In one of the web forwarding we got recently, I guess it was OHP, they indicated there's an annual program, Save America's Treasures, which has fairly good funding from the National Trust. And I know it's short in terms of time frame, but I think the applications are due at the end of this month. But I was thinking that that would be a perfect thing for La Plaza Theater to apply for. And I don't know if it's possible to coordinating a grant application by the end of this month. But I think that fund has maybe $5 million in it through the National Trust, so it's something to look into.
And just as an FYI, anytime I see any of those newsletters that has anything with the word grant in it, I do forward it off to Harriet.
Flynn, you prepared this for us for our discussion. Shall we turn these back into you now?
No,
You'll
since it's just
reissue
a
them?
one-page handout, we
Okay.
can go ahead and print those out
All
for
right.
you again.
Any other board comments? Okay, staff.
I have nothing.
I just have one thing. At the last city council meeting, the city council had on their agenda a discussion of appointing liaisons from council to the various boards and committees that we have. They had indicated that they won't be doing that for every board, but they did make some appointments last week. For the Historic Site Preservation Board, Mayor Moon is going to be the liaison with the board. So any questions, concerns that want to or need to be forwarded to the city council, he would be our liaison. The liaisons are not going to necessarily attend every meeting or come with the point of commenting on things. They're just here to observe if they do happen to attend the meetings.
Okay.
But again, it's to be a point of contact for the various boards and committees that we have at the city. That's it.
Okay. You know, at one point in time, we did all wear our name badges at our meetings. And then we decided that we would all turn them in with the plaques, so that when the plaques got put in front of us in the morning, we would have the name tag to put on.
I'll speak with Joanne about that.
All right, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
I kind of remember that, right? All right. Anything? Dick?
I'm sorry, one last thing. Just so that you know, we're still working on the possibility of a major personality being an honorary chair at the event. And there's been a lot of behind the scenes going on with that. So by next meeting, I'm hoping that we'll be able to make an announcement. It could be very exciting. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, board. We are adjourned.